Good evening. It's 6 o'clock. We're starting promptly on time tonight. And I'd like to call to order the Malibu City Council special meeting, April 24th, 2019. Welcome from the ridgeline to the coastline, from past Trancas to Topanga. Welcome all. And may I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Mullen?
Here.
Councilmember Pearson?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Farrer?
Here.
Mayor Wagner?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Let's see, who's out there would like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Raise a hand. Nobody wants to lead?
Ken, this is your big opportunity. Come on.
Ken? No? Okay.
America.
I'll lead
up.
it then. All right, I'll lead the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, Navy veteran. Okay.
Right hand on your heart if you're wearing a hat. Salute. Pledge of allegiance to the flag. Start. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Navy vet. Yes. May I have an approval of the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
I second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then finally, may I have a report on the posting of our agenda this evening?
The agenda for this meeting was properly posted on April 16th, 2019.
Thank you. And may I get a quick update on the SCE from the city manager?
Yes, thank
SCE.
you. Thank you, Mayor. I know this isn't on the agenda this evening, but I wanted to give a quick update for those in the audience and those at home watching on the Southern California Edison Vegetation Management Plan. Staff and the Assistant City Attorney had a call today with Edison and with representatives from the County of Los Angeles. And the County of Los Angeles has been asking for quite a few things from Edison, who today told us that they would be providing both the city and the county with the following. They're in the middle of completing a survey of what trees will be trimmed, and they will be providing us with that list, and as well as the county. They had been trimming trees prior to today, and that has since stopped. Until they complete this list. When the city and the county both receive it, we're going to look at it and determine if we need to require a coastal development permit. The city and the county's rules are a little different, so our processes might be different, but our intent is to make sure that they are following all of our rules with this project. Edison has assured us that where there is a tree on private property, they are contacting the homeowner, they're knocking on doors, and then leaving information at the front door as to what they will be doing, and there will be a dedicated phone number on the paperwork that homeowners can call and get more information and express concerns if they're worried about what is going to be cut. And we also asked them, though I don't believe it will happen at this time, to start with the east end as opposed to the west end. But they understood that our concern was to address the vegetation in the east end prior to the west end. So more to follow on that, Mayor and Council, and we'll keep you updated as we get the information. Thank you.
Thank you for the SCE update. I guess we're on to public comments on 1A and 1B. Speaker slips, please.
Mayor, would you like to explain that we're going to hear both of the items concurrently this evening, or perhaps the city attorney can?
Thank you, Trevor. Take a hold of it, young man.
All right. Since both items 1A and 1B deal with subject matter that's interlocking, they're going to be heard together as one item, and a public comment will be taken before both items, but they'll be deliberated and public comment will be consolidated for that item.
Thank you, Trevor. I have a wonderful list in front of me. First up on public comment, Ken Luskin. Ken is followed by Christopher Carradine, Chris Carradine, and Chris is followed by Carolyn Carradine. Thank you.
Good evening. I didn't bring any notes, so I can actually talk to you head up. So after I talked on Monday, the city manager said that the set-aside funds are county money, which is not true. That is Malibu taxpayer money which is set aside because it's for the county library of Malibu, all right? And it's set aside so that it cannot be used for maybe some boneheaded sewer project, which the people that I've talked to say they don't want. So that $3.5 million loan, which Mikey pointed out, I concur with, that the city finances are stretched right now, thin, and if anything were to happen, again, like an earthquake, we could be in really, really bad shape. So to pile more debt onto an already stressed situation doesn't make any sense. Now, let's put this in perspective. East Malibu hasn't burned in 25 years. I'm hearing about sewer projects. I don't hear about what we are doing to protect East Malibu from becoming like we just have with West Malibu. I mean, wouldn't that be the subject of conversation, big meetings to discuss everything we could possibly do to protect the citizens of Malibu from another disaster, which we know is coming? Yeah, and it's not just the fire department's role to protect our city, it's our city's government role to protect its citizens. That's the #1 responsibility of government, from the federal level all the way down to the local level. It's to protect the citizens and their property. That is your #1 priority. And guess what? How much money are we spending on fire protection? 0. For the whole city's 3 decades. Give me the numbers. It looks to me like basically 0. We have 100 employees. How many are fire protection experts? Can you tell me? I think there's basically 0. I mean, I don't get it. I just simply don't get it. You know, you're basically playing Monopoly here. Buying this property, we'll swap for that property. I mean, this is not Monopoly. This is a city where we live and we have businesses here, you know? And this is out of control. And you know why it's out of control. You know I've talked about this over and over again. It's because you people who live here, who care about the city, you don't run the city. You have someone from outside the city, not a citizen of this city, not an elected official of the city, with more power than an elected mayor. This is the epitome of idiocy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Chris Carradine, and you're followed by Carolyn, and Carolyn is followed by Gail, who's followed by Bruce.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening.
City Council persons, Reva, Heather, the sparse audience, which is kind of a surprise, and Trevor, thank you. I'm the owner of a former debris site at 5908 Canaan-Doom Road. Tonight I want to introduce you, as you do a budget workshop, to something called a blue pencil. This is utilized to do line item vetoes. The work plan that was proposed, which I read from cover to cover, with some surprise, because the first Woolsey item is not until item number 82 on page 19. And the priority list lists Woolsey recovery as the last priority for City Council in the proposed budget. I think those priorities ought to be reversed and make the Woolsey fire victims the first priority of the city. Now, with respect to the agenda and the budget proposals, there are no totals on the spreadsheets, but I added them up today. And the consultant fees for the proposed work plan is $20 million plus. That's consulting fees. And staff costs are $21 million. Now, these are to plan projects, not to implement projects. That's $40 million. If you divide that by 400 homes who want to secure a permit, that gives everybody $100,000 in permit waiver opportunity. So it would seem to me the city could waive permits quite easily. Really, all you have to do is eliminate a couple of line items. And if you guys don't have blue pencils, I'll be happy to provide them. I'm an architect and I got a lot of blue pencils. And I used them very effectively for an entire career with the Walt Disney Company, where we built major theme parks around the world on time and on budget. Now, what we need to do in this city is to do this work on time and on budget, and I believe that this budget excludes the Woolsey fire victims, and I believe that that is because most of the work plan items in this budget were promulgated and budgeted before November 9th. And so subsequent to November 9th, there's been very little attention in this budget paid to what it costs to run this city absent a quarter of the residents. Now, the last thing is that the budget is between $46 and $59 million, or something to that effect. At any rate, it's over $50 million, the budget for the city for one fiscal year. This is for about 5,000 domiciles, and this is for about 8,000 permanent residents. I have a hard time understanding that, particularly when we've got a very lengthy explanation of why $2.9 million in permit fees cannot be waived for those who've lost their homes. I'm going to have sunk costs of $150,000 before I can put a shovel in the ground, and I'm angry about that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Carolyn, you're up. Carolyn is followed by Gail.
I hope that you all heard the numbers that he gave, because I think they're staggering. We heard a lot at the very beginning of this adventure about expediting. Sheila Kuehl was all over the news, Henry Stern. Where are they now? Nobody is expediting anything. We come to the city council meetings, and you spend the first half of the city council meetings giving each other awards. And no one brings up anything about the fire or about the impact on the community. We have people displaced. We have supposedly a rainy day fund. But I guess from what I hear, that's to make sure we have to keep that, because we have to have money to assure our bond status. No, we have a rainy day. We need to use that money. We need to use some of this money that's being spent on consultants, not even on improvements, but just on consultants. And you can't waive the permit fees for us who've lost everything? We've lost everything. No one has a permit yet. We had the first planning approval. We've got apparently toxic soil. We were going through one hoop after another, after another, after another. We have to have a geologist. We're paying $8,000 to the geologist who was recommended by the city of Malibu, who then we have to have someone in Malibu, we have to pay $950 for him to read over the geologist's report. We're doing like for like within, what, a millimeter? So why are we having to do all of these other things? Why are we having to pay permit fees? Why do we need geology? Why do we can satisfy the fire department's requirements. We have a neighbor who can't. And he will, believe me, because they're doing case by case, he will get his through, because he's one of the privileged ones. I just find the whole thing appalling. No one's here. You know why no one's here? Because everyone's given up. People are leaving Malibu because they realize that their 3 years or 2 years, whatever their insurance allows them, is not going to be enough. We are nowhere near getting anything done. And I'm just absolutely appalled. This is like the greed that you would not waive the permit fees for your citizens who've lost everything, that you want to put in a circle, a traffic circle down here at the corner, and you want to put in new hardware and the list, Chris was reading me the list, it's unbelievable. The things that are prioritized before your concern about your citizens and their loss and getting them back in their homes. That should be the first and only thing on the agenda and on the budget. Everything else can wait a year or 2 years. That can't. If you want your citizens back, if you want a community back, you have to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Gail, you're up, and Gail is followed by Bruce.
Hi, Gail Block, and late of 6699 Doom Drive. And I'm here as part of the Woolsey Fire diaspora, because we are dispersed. We are not anywhere near Malibu. I'm not, my husband and I are not, because our loss of use funds are limited to a dollar amount. And if we were to spend what is considered appropriate for the house of ours that burned down, we would be out of funds in a year and 5 months. So the fact that permits are taking forever, the fact that nothing's moving along isn't a concern of ours, but I'm here to address the budget, and I'm here to support complete fee waivers for people who had residences and who are primary resident owners. The 4-page report that was released on the web this week listed various cities and what they did. It omitted the Lilac Fire and the cities in San Diego that completely waived fees. It omitted Napa, where fees were slashed. Why were these omitted? Why were there only items in that budget, in that 4-page report, that seemed to support not waiving permit fees? It's puzzling, and it breeds distrust and about the thoroughness and the balance of that report. And that is the report that you need to make your decisions. Doesn't seem right to me. Here are a few fun facts that I also want to share with you, because there's a misnomer that our insurance will take care of everything we need to rebuild in our homes. Our insurance doesn't pay for burned out trees. We have to pay to cut them down ourselves. It's out of pocket. Our insurance allows for 10% code upgrades. We have a long easement. We're having to cut down all the vegetation. We're going to have to grade and widen a driveway for fire requirements. We're going to have to put in a turnaround, which we don't have a sufficient turnaround. And that's going to have to come out of our code upgrades. We also are going to owe $6,000, $8,000 to the water district. So before we can put a shovel in the ground, before we can plan a home or pay for construction, we're going to have costs that are going to be through the roof. Everyone's insurance is different, but I think mine is exemplar of what we're going through. So I urge the city to invest in the human capital, which has been lost, the 15% of the community which is gone, to get us back. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. And final speaker, Bruce Silverstein. Good evening.
Before I begin, point of order, I had put in 2 speaker slips because there are 2 items that have now been combined. I think I'm entitled to 6 minutes because of that. Good evening, council members. You know,
It's your discretion as the chair if you want to allow him extra time.
Certainly, Bruce. Yeah, we did combine 1A and B, and if you need that much time, since you're the last speaker, I imagine you can have what you need, up to 6 minutes, sir.
I appreciate that, and I don't think I'll take 6 minutes, but I'll probably take more than 3.
Thank you.
So, you know, there are leaders and there are managers in institutions. Leaders have the vision. Managers are charged with implementing. Leaders are big thinkers. They decide. They know what is necessary to further the institution's interests. Managers, they push buttons. They do what's necessary to pull levers. They pull levers. They do what the leaders say needs to be done. They get it done. Well, you all, City Council, you are the leaders of this city. And this city is more than its economy. This city is more than its budget. This city is its residents. It's a small city. It's a tight city. It's a tight community. And the residents in this city have suffered a catastrophe. The city has too, but they've suffered a catastrophe. And this is an unusual year. This is an unusual budget opportunity. Be leaders. The city manager will get it done. That's her job. The city manager and her staff should not be dictating to the leaders how to lead this community through this tragedy. It's the other way around. So, with respect to the fee waivers, it is, in the grand scheme of things, a small accommodation for this city to help the residents who have lost their homes. Primary residencies should not have to pay the city for permissions to rebuild the houses that were taken from them. If the city ends up succeeding in its lawsuit that it's going to be filing, it'll get those fees back from SCE, which is who should pay for them. I understand that there's a good probability, by the way, that everyone who's suing SCE will succeed, but they're not succeeding today. And as far as cash management, the city has a much better opportunity to manage its cash than do the residents who've lost their homes. So I can't implore you stronger to think about the people. They're not line items, they're not dollars, they're human beings. You live here, you appreciate your community. You understand that it's more than what dollars come in and what dollars go out. Now, I understand that the city has suffered losses and the city is gonna be short, has a reserve, and again, the city's gonna be filing a lawsuit. You know, a lot of people who have suffered losses in this fire are banking, not on 100% recovery, but banking on the probability, the high probability, that a meaningful percentage of what they've lost will come back in the future. I would think that your attorneys have told you that's the probability. Nobody would be foolish enough to bank on that as a guarantee. But when budgeting, one ought to take into account probabilities. And so what if there's a little less in the kitty this year and maybe even next year if it's going to be replenished? And that's exactly what emergency funds are for. I also want to speak briefly, because it's in the documentation that was submitted for tonight, about the proposed sale of the 2 acres, which was the subject of some discussion on Monday evening. The documents that were submitted in connection with this meeting say 2 things. They say the city is in negotiations for the sale of those 2 acres. As I understood it, this council, the leaders, the instructors, did not direct that the city engage in those negotiations. But the report to this council says the city is in negotiations. The report also says the robust community outreach effort to determine appropriate uses of the parcels was, I can't read my own writing, but it was put aside because of the Woolsey fire and is unfunded. Well, again, you know, you're the leaders, and actually that was a decision made by the predecessor council, but there's still 3 of the 5 and you've 2 new. This council directed that there be a robust public outreach, and someone has decided, simply unilaterally decided, not to do that. Now, I am not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not a corruption advocate. I don't believe there's corruption. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I don't know. I don't have any reason to believe there is. But the one thing that I've been seeing repeatedly as I've been watching what goes on in the city is that this council does try to lead. And when this council leads in a way that the city manager doesn't like, it doesn't get done. And when the city manager wants things that this council doesn't want, they tend to get done. There's a mission creep that comes from the manager, and there is a lack of follow-through by the leaders. And that is a recipe for disaster. Thank you. Oh, one last thing. The agendas for the special meetings say that the mayor called special meetings. I noticed tonight's agenda doesn't even say anybody called this meeting. But the agenda say the mayor called the meeting, and I would like the mayor to state publicly whether he has in fact called the 2 prior special meetings of this council, because to my understanding, it was not called by the mayor. It was called by the city manager, and that is an outright misrepresentation in the agenda if it says called by the mayor and it wasn't. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll get back to your comments when it's our time to speak. Final speakers? Okay. Okay.
So Mayor, I'm going to kick it off a little bit, unless you want to do council comments. Did you want to move that on? Or?
Yeah, I think we have a moment for council comments. I know I have an update from where I was earlier today, and I'd like to give that to the community. So council comments and updates.
I'll comment. I'm going to comment on some of the speakers. Ken Luskin's comments about the fire, you know, it's like, we don't spend any money on the fire. That's kind of like saying we don't spend any money on the schools. And schools are a big part of our community. Certainly, it's the future of our community. We've got a lot of kids in school. And that's because the school gets their money before the city does. And they actually get a lot more money than the city does. The fire department's the same way. They get their money before the city does. It goes directly from them. We don't have the fire department as part of our budget like we do the sheriff. So I hope that answers some of your question. And to the gentleman, the former Navy veteran who said, you know, talked about the priorities on this. They're not necessarily in order of priority. And I'd like to know how much have we spent or budgeted for the extra planners as a result of the fire?
So it's about, Lisa, if you want to go ahead and answer.
So the Woolsey Fire operating budget for the proposed budget is a little over $2 million. Of that, I'd say 1.2 million is for expediting through extra consultants, the planners, plan checkers, inspectors, additional professional services that we need to get the work done.
So that $2 million is special Woolsey fire budget? Right?
Correct.
Okay. Another comment was permits are taking forever. Are permits taking forever?
I would say that would be in the eye of the person applying for the permit holder. I certainly understand that if you're in a rented house displaced without any of your belongings, you're very anxious to move forward, and there definitely have been a lot of challenges for people moving forward. I think one of the speakers mentioned about having to do a geology review, and I know there are people who have toxic substances that have been found under the foundation that have delayed things. The city is committed and city staff is committed to doing absolutely everything it can do to move things forward as quickly on our side that we can. There have been issues with some of the county processes that we are trying to assist with. But in terms of having staff available here at City Hall, we have our entire planning and other staff from the other departments, as well as the additional consultants here to do what we can to move it forward. So again, I'm not going to argue with someone if they think it's taking a long time. I certainly understand any of the frustrations.
Okay, thank you. And there was a comment about why haven't we included San Diego? We got that, and we got some more information about San Diego and their waiving of fees, and we'll talk about that when we get to that point. The other person who said, we're going to have to widen our road and do a turnaround. I'm not sure if you've spoken to the fire department yet, but people I know who have actually had those discussions have come out with relatively favorable results, and those are people with fairly challenging driveways, et cetera. So if you haven't had that discussion yet, it's a good idea to plan for it, but I wouldn't assume the worst, because the impression I get from them is that they're as committed as the city is to trying to make everybody whole again. So I know there's a lot of anxiety about that, but until you've talked to the fire department person who makes that decision, don't assume the worst. Be ready for the worst, but don't assume that it's definitely going to happen. And the other comment about someone has decided not to do public outreach. That's a decision that was made. It was put back because of the fire. Understandably, it's a budgeted item, so we'll be addressing that this evening. But thank you, everybody, for coming and commenting.
Any other council comments?
Yeah, just quickly, I just want to thank all of the speakers for sharing your concerns and what you're feeling. It really does mean a lot to me, and for the huge amount of emails. Some were incredibly well written, I thought. Mr. O'Neill, your email was really struck a chord, really well done. Thank you for sharing that. So hear you all loud and clear. As a former planning commissioner for many years, I can fully understand your impatience and how long this seems to be taking. And what makes it even, I would say, feel sadder to me is the normal process is so much longer, as you know. So yeah, it's challenging to build in Malibu. Our expedited process can seem challenging as well. I just want to acknowledge that. I fully want to acknowledge that. It's definitely been a difficult reality at this point that I'm committed to doing everything I can about, and I know a lot of other people are here. Once again, if you're having specific issues, please feel free to get a hold of me. I'm glad to try and direct, help any way I can. A number of you in this room I've done that with. And honestly, it's really helpful if you do that, because we don't know what your issue is if you don't express it. So we can't magically help something we don't know exists. And there's a lot of unique situations out there that fit into other buckets, but every property in Malibu can be different. Every situation can be different. Everyone's insurance can be different, which is a real challenge, As I read the budget, which I read for many hours, made tons of notes and went through it, really trying to get deep into it. I do actually love budgets, and this is a big one. It just occurred to me that I hope the idea I had, I wrote down here, is that the city needs to reach out after this disaster and encourage everybody to really look at your insurance policy. I know I got lucky, my place didn't burn down, but I know that next day I was looking at my policy because I realized I had no idea what it said. I had no idea. And I think a lot of us are in the same boat, particularly with an older home. Your agent doesn't call up every year and go, let's go through the details. So anyhow, that's what's on my mind. I don't want to slow things up, but thank you very much for coming down. I really appreciate it.
And
Skylar?
speaking of that, Mikey, at 9 a.m., I believe this weekend on Sunday, 10 a.m. in this room, Richard Bloom has organized the insurance commissioner for the state of California to be here. So I really hope that even maybe those of you that didn't have damage attend that meeting and that they hear your concerns, because I think that it's very crooked, sort of what's gone on with some of the people in our community and how their insurance was written, and whether they were aware of that or not aware of it or trying to save money. I really feel that they need to hear that from you. They've heard it from me. This sucks. This flat out sucks. And dealing with all of the issues that each and every one of you have that are so personal. And I see, and I know you, I know many of you for many, many years, and it breaks my heart to see you guys have to go through this process. So I hope that our planning staff and the rest of the city staff will continue to do the great job that they're doing and answer your questions. And if you know people that are complaining, bitching, moaning, whatever it is, please ask them to come in here and get a hold of one of us or come to our staff, and they're here, ready, willing, and able to help in any way that they can to move the process forward. So thank you. And also, this weekend, Saturday, we got TheraSurf at Surfrider, so that's a good positive thing, and I wore my TheraSurf shirt right here to represent, and hope to see you at the beach.
Yeah, yes, Karen, you're up.
I want to thank everybody who's here, but also I want to thank everybody who's emailed me, those who've lost their homes. And I received a lot of emails from your friends and neighbors asking for support for you. And I want to acknowledge that feeling of community and empathy that I received from many people. So we are all in this together. I'm one of the lucky people who didn't lose my home in the fire. I've imagined many times in the last several months what my life would be like if it had. And that's a hard thing to think about. And for everybody who's in the room that I've talked to about it, I'm really sorry, you know, and all I can say is I got lucky. I have no other explanation. I do want to add to what Skylar said about the insurance commissioner coming here. It's not just a presentation. There is also an opportunity for several hours, I'm not sure exactly how long, for you to meet with the insurance commissioner and his staff one-on-one about your particular case. So please know that that is going to be here this Saturday. I'm not sure if now's the right time to address some of the statements or questions about
Yes,
what other
we're still on-
counties and cities have done.
Well, we're still on council comments, so while.
You can put that
yeah.
into discussion when we.
Okay,
After
then
the staff
I will
report.
hold those items. And I've thought a lot about this. I've joked this week that we just need to print the money. We don't have enough money to do everything that's on our list. So we do have hard cuts to look at. And I have some ideas, and every single thing is a trade-off. There's no happy ending. So I don't know how else to put that. We can't have it all. And for those who've already lost so much, I'd like to do as much as possible. There are things that have come up since I've been elected, and certainly things that came up before that, that would be awesome things to have in this city, that would be benefits, that would be make our city better. I think Many of those are going to be deferred, hopefully not forgotten entirely. So I want everybody to know, I think every one of us here has thought about that. It's very sobering. So, so this is not a happy meeting, okay? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I'd like to look to the council for a little bit of a vacillation from Robert's rules. We had two speakers come in on 1A and 1B. If the council would like, okay, I have consensus. We have two additional speaker slips, Carla McCloskey and Craig Hill. So enjoy your 3 minutes, and then I'll get to my comments after that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I did not realize, my own fault, that it started at 6 o'clock, and I have not been aware of what other people have said, so I really don't want to repeat this. But I really feel so much, it's like thoughts and prayers that we offer all the time. I mean, we were said that we'd really look at this, and I just wish we could give people some help, because I'm the lucky one as well. But and there's so many people, and I'm just shocked that this place isn't full. And I think it's because people have given up, and the despair is horrific. And we have to do something. We have so much money for so many things that I find absolutely ridiculous. We pay a lot of money for a lot of things, and I think that some relief of some sort has to be done for these people, and I really plead for that. And we can't just say, oh, we'd really like to. We have to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. And final speaker, Craig Hill. Good evening, Craig.
Good evening. I missed it too, not because I didn't know, but because I was rushing from downtown to get here. So I will echo her comments, and I don't know what anybody else said, but I just wanted to urge you to implement the Municipal Code Section 2.36.110 regarding the commission compensation. I've come to realize that people don't realize what a job it is. It's pretty much a serious job, and it's one thing to volunteer for it, and that's great, but it's another thing to be actually losing money on the deal in terms of expenses and all. So just asking for the token implementation of that code section. It's a drop in the bucket for the city, but it would help me, and I think probably some others significantly. And just by way of perspective, and also to illustrate my attachment to the city, when you take like the nominal $100 amount and work that out, adjusted for inflation, it works out to about a fifth of what I was paid in my first job flipping burgers at Malibu Frosty Freeze at age 13. So just, you know, if only I had my law degree then, I would have been aware of the child labor laws. But anyway, thank you, and I hope you consider that. Thanks.
Thank you, Craig. Final speaker. I am going to cut it off at this point. After this speaker, we're just going to have to stop on speaker slips. Stephen O'Neill, this is with the grace of the council, taking on extra speakers. Thank you.
Yeah, I apologize, Mr. Mayor, but the agenda as written states that this section is for public comment, and in my experience representing similar agencies, these are for items that are not on the agenda. And I was a little confused because I know this is an agendized item, and I didn't see any place where there was public comment or input for that. So thank you for according me this.
Yeah, your
this
3
time.
minutes will start now. Is that okay?
I'm not going to be that long. I just wanted to say, I've been here before to talk about the permit fee issue. If you could consider, I know this is the time because you have a budget before you, to consider a reduction or a waiver of some fees to try and get some accommodation for the homeowners. I was happy to see and surprised, frankly, when I saw that you guys are AA+ by S&P. You're taking care of your work with your bond rating. You're taking care of your finances. But I was also surprised to see the size of your reserve. And right now, I think was projected last year to be $20 million, I think, for undesignated reserve funds. And if that's a place you can go, or if there's other concessions you can make within your budgetary process, it'd be much appreciated. And I just want to thank you for your attention and your time.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Okay, now we're back to council comments, and I think I was the last one on council comments. My update today for 5 hours, I was at Sheila Kuehl's office with the LA County Fire Department chiefs and top staff LA County Sheriff's Department, chiefs and top of staff, California State Parks, National Parks, MRCA, and Ventura County Fire, LA County Planning. I mean, it was a full room. And usually when you go to these things, I have my skeptic's hat on about what I expect and what I perceive. What I thought I would be seeing was a whitewashing of what went on in the Woolsey event, and I was happily surprised that the demeanor of the sheriff and the fire department and the various other members of the speakers was what I really feel that you're going to get a fair, square analysis from Sheila Kuehl's office. These people were not ducking from criticism. They were accepting the criticism, they welcomed it, and I was impressed. I'll be there tomorrow for another 5 hours, and I'll give you an update, and they'll be done with it before October. And you'll be surprised when you finally read it. They'll keep it to a minimum of 80 to 100 pages, I believe. And you're going to be surprised. There's going to be a lot of people that have hats on that are going to express themselves in that report, and they'll admit their failures. And I was happy to see that. So that was today's 5-hour meeting. I'll be there tomorrow. And Bruce Silverstein, your comment on how we run the posting of the agenda and things like that. I actually don't make the call myself for the meetings. We depend on staff and the city manager to orchestrate that and bring that forward. At least in my position, I don't say what's on the agenda. I just let them do it because that's what they've done for so many years. And the city manager brings it forward. Using my name isn't like using the mayor's name. I think what they do is they just say it's his obligation or he can call it, but I actually don't make the agenda and I don't call that. But the formality is part of being here on the dais, and I'm sure it'll be the same when Karen is up next and Mikey after her. So I hope that answers your question. And that should do it. Now let's get back into budget and have at it.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Just to clarify, this is calling items 1A and 1B, right?
Yes, now we're starting 1A and 1B. Thank you, Trevor.
I really appreciate that everyone came down, even though I know the topic is very difficult. This is my 15th year providing and presenting a city budget. This has been a horrible process for me and for city staff to put this together. Always on the forefront of our mind are the residents who have suffered through the Woolsey fire and continue to suffer. Contrary to some of the things that have been said, the city manager and city staff do not have the luxury to make decisions about what goes forward in the budget, which is why we are all here tonight. We put together what we can and have brought this forward tonight to ask the council, which is pretty unusual. I've never actually had this April budget meeting be this in-depth, where we want the council to look through and help make, and they have to make the decisions of what gets done or doesn't get done. The city can't do it. The city has a work plan that the council provides to us. Just to clarify, one of the speakers was concerned that the Woolsey fire was down at the lower or higher number down at the list. The list is not done by priority. It comes up as it gets put on chronologically, and then we group them by what of the priorities that the council has established is being accomplished by that task. And so I want everyone in the room and watching that the highest priority for the city is addressing the Woolsey fire victims and making sure that we're doing everything we can. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. I actually wanted to thank Mr. Silverstein. I think what you said at the beginning of your comments was very eloquent and did make sense. I would also like to invite you to have a meeting with me so I can explain how things do get done. For example, the decision to reallocate the funds that were going to be used to discuss the vacant land were made by the City Council during the mid-year budget amendment in January, and I would be more than happy to show you how that works and walk through the process for you. I work at the direction of the council, as does city staff. I do not make decisions on my own. As you'll see tonight, the council will be making these very difficult decisions. My job and the finance department's job is to bring the facts forward. Talking about numbers isn't fun. Putting together a budget is not fun. And I know it doesn't come through that we care, but we truly, truly care and want to help you. But our role as staff is limited, and so those decisions are going to have to come from the leaders, from the elected officials here tonight. I wanted to briefly comment on, and we'll get to it later, about what cities or counties we looked at to compare. There are quite a few. We tried to look at cities because obviously we're not a county. We do have some additional data to include verbally as to what the city of San Diego did and the county of San Diego. And so we can provide that when the staff gets to item 1B. And then just a couple other things that did come up regarding the posting of the agendas. The City Council adopts an official council meeting schedule every year, and that's the schedule of meetings. The way things come onto the agenda depends on what's happening in the work plan, what they've asked us to do, if things have been asked to be moved forward, when they're ready to come forward. We do review it with both the city attorney, and the draft agenda is actually emailed to the mayor, whoever's the mayor at the time, the city attorney, and myself for final review. So there is quite a bit of process that goes on. So again, Mr. Silverstein, I'd be happy to explain any of that to you further. And in regarding the negotiations for the 2 acres, maybe we're arguing on semantics at this time, but the City Council did discuss in closed session the price and terms, which is a negotiation, and then directed staff to bring an item forward in open session, which was done on Monday evening, and have further directed staff to hold a joint commission meeting with the Parks and Rec Commission, Public Works, and the Cultural Arts Commission to discuss the matter, and so that's what's happening with that. I'm going to turn it over to the Assistant City Manager, Lisa Soger, and just take one moment to thank her and all of the city staff, including our department heads who have done what they can to make this budget work, and we will continue to remove anything that we need to do to make it the best for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Riva. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and I'm pleased to see community members here. I'm sorry for the reason you're participating with us tonight, but it is very important. And I do want to, we're going to take a little time to go through the budget process in a little more detail. One, because we have 2 new council members with us for their first budget process. And we do, for the first time, actually have people in the audience. Usually this budget meeting is very sparsely attended, and we wish more people would come out and participate with us and see how this is done. As Riva mentioned, staff worked really hard this year, and it was a tough year. Budgets aren't easy, and it was more complicated because of all the moving parts and pieces in the aftermath of the fire. And we are here tonight to take this first pass at a budget for council reaction. And I particularly want to thank by name some of the finance staff who worked really hard to get these numbers together, and that includes Ruth Pieman, Renee Neerman, Joni Hand, Pamela Romani, and also I'd like to thank Elizabeth Shavelson, who did a lot of research for us. Okay, moving on. So I just want to sort of briefly talk about how we schedule the budget every year. Staff begins working on the next fiscal year's budget in January. The general fund grant applications are due at the end of March every year. The council has this special meeting to discuss the budget for the first time at the end of April. Subsequently, the Administration and Finance Committee reviews the budget and the general fund grants in the beginning of May. The budget is brought to the council 2 more times before it is finally adopted and in place for July 1st of the new fiscal year. So let me talk a little bit about the process. And again, to reiterate what Riva mentioned is we are basing this budget on the goals and priorities set by the council. And our work plan is made up of items that the council has directed staff to address. So each department reviews the goals established by the council and prepares draft budgets for their portion of it. The finance department then identifies eligible funding sources for these tasks and seeks to find special revenue sources whenever possible. Services and positions are added or eliminated based on accomplishing the council's goals. The proposed budget is presented to the City Council, who determine the priorities based on funding availability. For many years, the city has had robust revenues and reserves to enable the council to fund the important community priorities that they set. For the first time in over a decade, the proposed budget has limitations due in a large part to the Woolsey fire. So when we get to the end of this presentation and we look at the work plan, staff will be asking council to really make hard choices and prioritize for us which things they want to move forward in the coming year. In addition to the council, the Administration and Finance Subcommittee, which is made up of 2 council members, reviews the budget. The subcommittee also reviews and makes recommendations on the general fund grant applications. This body additionally reviews all appropriations of more than $10,000 throughout the course of the year. It also reviews quarterly financial reports and other finance or administrative items before they come to council. And I have a couple slides just showing you a little bit of a summary of the revenue sources that the city has available to it. And we receive revenue from a number of sources, and we group them into funds. An example, the biggest example is the general fund, which is comprised of taxes, fees, licenses and permits, and service charges. Other funds come from various entities like the state or the county. Certain neighborhoods, for example, have formed special assessment districts to achieve their specific neighborhood goals. The Legacy Park Fund includes commercial revenue from rents of city-owned property. And additionally, the city, wherever possible, seeks grants from outside sources to implement projects. These funds have different uses. The general fund is the most flexible of all city funding sources and can be used for any governmental purpose by all departments and on all projects. Other funding sources have very specialized uses. For example, gas tax can only be used for street maintenance or street-related capital improvement projects. Funds from assessment districts can only be used to fulfill the goals of each specific district. The Legacy Park Fund is used for debt service on the land, maintenance of the park, and clean water projects. When we look at the proposed budget for the coming year, it's based on expected revenue that we've sort of analyzed. In fiscal year 2019-2020, the city anticipates receiving $49.7 million of revenue, including $33.1 million of general fund revenue. Looking at a breakdown of general fund revenues, property taxes accounts for 38% of the general fund, In prior years, property tax made up about 40 to 42% of the general fund. The projected percentage has dropped due to potential impacts from the Woolsey fire. Malibu's other major tax revenue sources are sales tax, utility users tax, and transient occupancy tax, which together make up another 29%. Licenses and permits and service charges are the next largest sources of revenue, each at 12%. Now we can look at some trends over the past 10 years. A review of overall general fund revenue demonstrates that the city has had financial growth and stability in the past. The city began to see significant growth in fiscal year 2012-2013, with general fund revenue increasing from $21.6 million in fiscal year 2011-2012 to $25 million in fiscal year 2013-2014, and to $33.6 million in the last fiscal year. In a normal year, Reeve and I are conservative in budgeting and forecasting, especially at this point in the budget process. Due to the Woolsey fire, we are projecting revenue to decrease this fiscal year and next year. We are still waiting on information from a number of sources, outside sources who are tracking revenues, such as property tax. And as we get that information in, hopefully in the next month or so, the budget will be adjusted accordingly as we move forward. Assessed property value information is provided to the city from the Los Angeles County Assessor's Office and shows currently an assessed value of $16.9 billion. This represents a 7.3% increase over the previous year and a 64% increase over 10 years. These numbers predate the Woolsey fire, and one of the entities that we have not received information from is the County Assessor's Office. They have not yet completed their assessed value reductions for the Woolsey fire, and as we get that information in, we will update the budget. The growth in secured property tax follows the same trend line as the city's overall general fund revenue, as well as the growth in the city's assessed property value. 10 years ago, the city received $6.7 million in property taxes, and last year that number was $10.4 million. Our conservative projections show that number dropping based on the fire to $10 million for the current fiscal year and $10.3 million for next year. Again, as we get information from the county, we'll adjust the budget accordingly as we move forward in the process. The city's second largest tax revenue source is sales tax, which again has experienced growth over the past few years. The city's major sales tax contributors are typically restaurants. The Woolsey fire has had an impact on this revenue source as well. The fourth quarter of 2018 was down almost 20% from 2017. Unlike other jurisdictions, the holiday quarter is not usually Malibu's peak sales tax season. The summer months are much higher. We do not yet have information on the long-term effects of the fire, and we will be monitoring these closely. The proposed budget includes a drop in the current year projections of $200,000. We are also projecting next year to stay at $3.5 million, which is down from previous years. The city works with HDL company to monitor the sales tax revenues for the city. They catch any errors, including unpaid tax revenue, and ensure that the city receives the proper amounts. Again, they will be helping us monitor and do projections for sales tax based on the fire. The city's utility users tax revenue is projected to be slightly lower as well, with the annual revenue amount of $2.2 million, which is about $200,000 less than prior years. And again, this is as a result of the fire. These are taxes that are levied on the charges paid by users of utilities, including electricity, gas, and telephone. The utility provider collects the taxes as part of the bills and remits the money to the city. Tax from hotels, motels, and the short-term rentals of private homes has increased over the past 10 years. Tax from hotels and motels was $2.3 million in the prior year. The Woolsey fire has impacted this source as well. One of the 7 hotel properties was damaged in the fire and is not anticipated to reopen in this calendar year. We are projecting revenue of $1.9 million in the current year and $2 million for next year. When the city first began collecting revenue from short-term rentals in 2009, it generated $100,000. Last year, revenues exceeded $2.4 million. Again, the Woolsey fire has affected this revenue source. Not many registered short-term rental properties were damaged in the fire, but there was a decrease in activity during the holiday season. We are projecting revenue of $1.6 million for the current year and $1.7 million for next year. Another reason we are decreasing this amount is that we're projecting based on an anticipation of a new short-term rental ordinance at some point in the coming year and wanted to be conservative in our numbers here. The proposed expenditure budget is based on the council's priorities and work plan. The work plan for 2019-2020 is attached at the end of the budget, as I mentioned, and details the city's priorities and which departments will work collaboratively to achieve them. The Woolsey fire recovery has been added as a priority for the city, and we plan to go over the work plan in detail with the council after the formal budget presentation. The council's priorities come from the desire to provide excellent services to the Malibu community. This service ranges from outstanding community programs like Chumash Days and Spring Happening to major capital improvements that enhance safety for residents and visitors. Notable achievements in the beginning of the current year include the acquisition of the 3 parcels of vacant land and the opening of the Civic Center water treatment facility. Total expenditures are projected. I feel like this is out of order. So total expenditures are projected at $56.2 million. The general fund expenditure budget is at $35.2 million, and it includes not only city operating expenses, but also ongoing expenses related to the Woolsey fire, and some one-time capital projects that are being funded with general fund dollars. Other major expenses include $16.1 million of special revenue expenses. Legacy Park Project Fund expenses are budgeted at $2.6 million, and the Civic Center water treatment facilities operating budget is projected to be $1.6 million. All expenses for operating the facility will be reimbursed through assessments to the connected properties in Phase 1. When we look at the breakdown of total expenditures, it shows that 36% will go to the operating and maintenance of the city, 20% to personnel, 18% to capital projects, and 16% to public safety. 4% will go to ongoing Woolsey fire operating costs, including consultants, community outreach, and future storm response. And 6% will go to fire and storm-related facility and infrastructure repairs. Staff is coordinating with FEMA and Cal OES to account for all of these projects and will be implementing some, but not all of them in the coming year. FEMA and Cal OES cover 93.75% of these eligible costs, and the city's responsibility will be 6.25%. When we look at this same breakdown for just the general fund, it shows that operating and maintenance expenses are at 35%, personnel at 29%, public safety at 24%, and capital projects at 5%. The Woolsey fire operating and maintenance expenses are at 6% of the general fund budget, and the general fund contribution for the Woolsey fire capital improvements is projected at roughly $260,000 or 1%. That's basically the 6.25% match that the city is required to make. The city is required to maintain a balanced general fund every year, which means that ongoing operating expenses cannot exceed the annual general fund revenue for the year. Revenues are projected at $33.1 million, and operational expenditures are projected at $31.3 million, which is in line. However, operational expenditures for the Woolsey Fire are projected at just over $2 million, increasing the overall general fund expenditures to $33.3 million, which exceeds the $33.1 million in revenue. Staff recommends a one-time appropriation of approximately $250,000 from the general fund undesignated reserve to maintain a balanced budget. And here you can see these are the council priorities, and the Woolsey Fire has been added. And again, these include preserving Malibu's rural character and enhancing our environmental efforts, safety, and a variety of other community programs for the community. And here you can see the expenditures broken down by fund, and total expenditures in the budget are $56.2 million. The city contracts with a number of outside agencies and professionals for services that are not provided by staff. These services include law enforcement, legal services, film permitting, plan check services, and street maintenance. Public safety remains one of the city's highest priorities. Law enforcement is a major part of that public safety mission. The city will spend over $8 million on its contract with the Los Angeles County Sheriff Department next year, which includes $670,000 for the beach team. This represents an increase of 4.5% for the county's required administrative increase and the liability trust fund. Compared to other neighboring contract cities, Malibu spends $633 per residence on this very important expense. And you can see that Malibu pays more per capita than its neighboring contract cities, and it also pays much less than cities that have a full-service police force. Hermosa Beach, which is probably the lowest of those other communities, pays $760 per capita, and their law enforcement only needs to cover an area of 1.43 square miles. Malibu is 20 square miles and has a much more challenging topography and layout than Hermosa Beach. And all cities that have contracts with the LA County Sheriff participate in covering those costs for the Liability Trust Fund. In recent years, those costs have been increasing as a part of settlements that the counties had to pay out. A number of city managers, including Riva, have been actively working to curtail those costs. Currently, the percentage of total LA County Sheriff costs includes 11% for the Liability Trust Fund, and the increase on that rate for this year is 0.5%. So just to be aware that we're watching the costs, but at some point they do continue to rise. I do want to point out an expense in the budget for debt service. So for next year, the city must make debt service payments on Legacy Park, City Hall, and Trancas Field, and these payments will total $3.2 million. The city will not have a debt service payment on the new land acquisition in the next fiscal year. Debt service will start in fiscal year 2020-2021 in the amount of $550,000, and in the following years, the amount will be $1.2 million. And I just want to point that out, that expense isn't here today, but it will be something that we need to prepare to pay for in the coming budgets. The proposed budget includes $9.98 million for capital projects. Ongoing multi-year projects include the street overlay project, improvements to PCH and other Measure R projects. There are also clean water projects and improvements to city facilities, including electric vehicle charging stations and the solar carport structure at City Hall. And I do want to point out that wherever possible, this is where staff looks for other funding sources, grants, other special revenue funds that can cover capital projects. Budgets for ongoing operational costs and capital improvement projects related to the Woolsey fire have been separated into their own budget pages to allow for better tracking. Both the operational expenses and the capital costs are anticipated to last for several years. Operational costs are projected to be $2 million, and capital costs are projected at $3.6 million for fiscal year 2019-2020. One project that is being funded by special funds, not by the general fund, is the Civic Center Water Treatment Facility. And this, the largest capital improvement project that the city has done, and construction on phase 1 was completed in the current year with the grand opening in October of 2018. The city in the coming year will be at work on the design and assessment district engineering for phase 2, using $1.7 million in grant funds that can only be used for this particular project. The proposed budget includes funding for 83 full-time employees, the equivalent of 13.5 employees working as part-time staff, and the equivalent of 3.5 employees working as student interns. All salary ranges, positions, and benefits are approved by council as part of the final budget. The city typically provides an annual cost of living adjustment to employees. The adjustment is derived from the Consumer Price Index using an annual percentage from February. A cost of living adjustment of 2.5% has been included in the proposed budget. The ongoing costs of public employee pensions and retiree health benefits continue to be a difficult topic for many municipalities. Even though CalPERS contribution rates, which are now at 17.875% for classic employees and 7.07% for new employees, have been increasing slightly, staff has worked towards lowering these costs. The proposed budget projects 46 classic employees, which represents a decrease of 10 from the prior year. And this chart is doing exactly what I think had been hoped for when PEPRA came into being in 2013, is that as classic employees who were more expensive began to retire or move on to other cities or other jobs, that they would more and more be replaced by new employees who don't, whose pension benefits are at a much lower rate. And so you can see where we're seeing that this chart is going to cross, and fairly soon it looks like that we'll begin to have more new employees who, again, are less of a burden on the city in the long run. So statewide, many municipalities are struggling with these unfunded liabilities from their CalPERS pension programs, and we strive very hard to be aware of the trends and plan accordingly. This is made slightly easier because the city does not have any public safety employees or unions, which limits its liabilities. Additionally, the city has always had a conservative PERS contribution plan. Bartell Associates LLC completed an actuarial analysis of the city's CalPERS pension plans last year, which indicates that the city is able to maintain the current and projected PERS rates. Staff had been evaluating the possibility of making a lump sum payment that would lower future costs for the city. While that is not possible in the proposed budget, staff will continue to monitor the options available. In addition to pension costs, the city will pay $211,000 next year to cover health insurance for its existing retirees. By requiring 5 years of employment before health benefits are vested, the city is able to limit future liability. The city has been putting money aside to cover these costs in the future. In the next year, the city will also contribute $514,000 to these other post-employment benefits, as is mandated by the state. Each year, the council awards funds to local nonprofit groups through the General Fund Grant Program. This year's budget includes $190,000 for grants. 39 applications have been received, totaling almost $1 million. The grants will be discussed by the Administration and Finance Subcommittee starting at 9 a.m. on May 2nd, and the subcommittee's recommendations will be included in the budget item on the May 28th council agenda. At the start of the current fiscal year, the city had a general fund undesignated reserve of more than 100% of the annual general fund operating budget. This enabled the city to spend $13 million of its reserves to complete the land acquisition in September of 2018, while leaving reserves of over 70%. Since that time, the city has had to use some reserves to respond to the Woolsey fire, and due to the decrease in revenues after the fire, the proposed budget now provides for a general fund undesignated reserve of 65% of the annual general fund operating budget. Council policy requires that the city maintain at least 50% in reserves. To maintain the city's high credit rating, the city must maintain at least 65% in reserves, and our projections are showing that the reserves are now just at 65%. The proposed budget anticipates a starting general fund undesignated reserve of $22.3 million and an ending reserve amount of $20.3 million. The total of all funds at the end of this fiscal year will be $30.1 million and a projected ending balance for next fiscal year of $23.6 million. All the facility and infrastructure repair projects from the Woolsey fire must be completed by the city and submitted for reimbursement to FEMA. Historically, these reimbursements have taken years to be received. In the proposed budget, we are showing these FEMA costs as a liability against the general fund in the amount of $6.1 million, and this doesn't affect what we are calling the percent of the reserves, but it does affect our cash flow. And staff is doing everything they can to work with FEMA to expedite the process, but we are conservative here in showing it as a liability until we actually start to receive payments. In addition to the undesignated reserves, the council has approved specific projects with set-aside funds that are tracked separately as designated reserves. Some are funded with general fund revenue, but others are funded with special revenue like gas taxes or highway funds. Legacy Park revenue comes from the lease payments of the commercial tenants. The funds you see in the Civic Center wastewater treatment facility line are the prepaid assessments by the city and the county of Los Angeles. The city is holding these funds and they will be used to pay back the loans and bonds issued for the construction of the facility. So looking ahead in our budget process, the next scheduled meeting will be the Administration and Finance Subcommittee on May 2nd, and they will review the general fund grants and discuss the budget. The budget public hearing will be held on May 28th, and the final budget will be back for review in June for adoption before the start of the next fiscal year. And at this time, I think before we get into the work plan items, it's probably appropriate to talk about the fees.
So I'd like to just give a very brief report. The council does have the written staff report, which explains the schedule of fees. What we can do is discuss that, because I know that the issue in front of the council for tonight is what to do about the fees that are associated with the Woolsey fire rebuilds. For this upcoming fiscal year, we anticipate that revenue to be approximately $2.6 million. That number comes from an estimate from city staff that approximately 150 applications will come into the planning department for like applications on the rebuild plus the 10%, and approximately 100 homes will be issued building permits. Again, this is an estimate. We currently have approximately 70 applications that have been processed through planning, and so we're using that kind of flow of applications to estimate for the upcoming year. This year to date, the fees received for those planning applications is about $250,000. Obviously, those applications this year have received planning verification but have yet to be issued building permits. So the total number that the council needs to consider is the $2.6 million. As I mentioned earlier, we did reach out to a variety of cities and a couple counties, and have since the report came out and some council correspondence came in, did further research with the city and county of San Diego to see who has waived fees and whatnot. Not that it should matter in your decision, but I will just point out that the city of Malibu's budget is considerably smaller than those entities that have waived fees. The city of San Diego, for example, is almost a $4 billion budget. The county of San Diego is a $6 billion budget, and so it's a different beast, but certainly it's important for us to have this discussion. And I have the entire department head, staff, and management team here ready to help walk through with the council what could be removed from the budget in terms of what's a priority or what's mandated or not mandated, if the council so wishes to get into that depth of it and make this work both for the council, the city, and the community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Are we going to do the work plan, Lisa? Do you want to do that now? Or we're going to let the council discuss?
I think we should probably deliberate on the fees. The council should make some decisions because that will affect what we do with the priorities.
Or we'll leave it to the council, and I apologize for seeming a little disorganized. We've never gone through the budget in this way, and so this is a little new territory for us, but we're open to however the council wants to do it. If you'd like to go through the work plan, we can do it that way, or you can discuss the fee matter first.
How would you folks like to address it?
Let's have a little chat.
Okay.
Oh, you want to do the work plan?
Chat, work plan? Work plan? Sure. Okay.
I'm outnumbered again.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Work plan.
So.
Well, I have to say, though, just to interrupt here a second, as she reviews the work plan, it's probably a good idea for us to know whether we're looking to, like, not the blue pen, as the gentleman said. I like to think of it as the red pen. There you go. And, so just keep that in mind. If you're red pen inclined, this is the time to consider what you want to put the red to.
I like that, and also to be thinking about the top 10 direction for the future so that the staff has more direction than 100+ items on the work plan. It might be nice to get a top 10 out of the council.
We would appreciate that greatly.
Yes, I agree. I mean, this work plan has been evolving over several years, so it has now ballooned to 102 items. Those come from council direction that is given at council meetings for staff to look into things, move things forward, and so then they get added to the work plan again and prioritized in the council priority sort of sections. If they have to do with environment, they're grouped together. If they have to do with public safety, they're grouped together. And again, as we mentioned, we created a new Woolsey Fire category. It would be very helpful for us to have the council really give us those priorities because I think at this point, 102 items is unmanageable for the coming year. Additionally, what we tried to do, and this is not something we've ever done before, so again, this matrix that we attached as part of the as part of the work plan, because usually it's just a narrative, we tried to create some way to quantify what these things are costing. And I know that one of the speakers had suggested that they thought that these were all consultant costs and they weren't actually physical implementation, and that's actually not the case. For example, the routine street maintenance, which is on this work program, is actually the contractor who performs the annual street maintenance, and those funds are actually not general fund funded. They are from special revenue that can only be used for streets. What we've sort of been evolving this matrix because, again, it's the first time we've ever done it. What we did in the matrix that went out as part of the staff report is try to identify which items we were unable to find money for in the current budget. And we indicated which items were funded through the general fund and not special revenue funds. And so we're asking the council to really go through it with us tonight to figure out if there are things that are on your priority list that you want to see funded and implemented in the coming year. We need to look at what can come off. So how can we free up other funds? So for example, if dealing with the Civic Center specific plan, which we're estimating as $500,000 to do, if that is a high priority, we need to take $500,000 out of what has been budgeted. So I leave it to you to determine what your priorities are, and then we can work through the budget items to figure out how we can accomplish that with the funding we have.
Thank you, Lisa. Briefly, I was wondering if the public has access to this, because I know it's new, and it might be easy for them to follow along if they're interested.
So the matrix that we gave you went out as a supplemental budget item, so it is on the website and is available, and it is out in the on the table in the foyer.
Thank you.
That's just a bigger piece of paper. Right?
And then what we did to try and simplify us walking through it is that we grouped together the things that are unfunded, which totals about $3.4 million. And again, some of those can be pushed off to future years. We're not asking you to say we're not doing them. We would just like to figure out what is a priority to get done in the next year and what we can put on the list to pick up in next year's budget or the following year. The green that you have on your bigger printout is all the items that are general fund. Some of those items are things that are just basically ongoing business of the city, like budget management, because that made its way onto the priorities list.
Thank you, Lisa. Mikey had one brief question, I believe.
So the one thing, and we discussed it a little bit earlier to talk about, isn't just the money, but it's staff time. So if you look at 100 plus items, clearly there's not staff time to perform them all, even if we were extremely wealthy. I guess we'd go back, get more staff or something like that. So how do we develop a work plan on available staff time? How do we coordinate the two together to help make that decision?
So again, this is a really new process for us, and we were trying to come up with a way to quantify not only the dollars that we would have to pay, but what it takes in staff time. And I don't know that we've gotten there yet. I will say that there are things that are the daily business of the city that have to go on that are on this list, like records management. Independently, I came up with a number and Heather came up with a number, and they work out to about the same, that over the course of the year, it is equivalent to 4 full-time staff people that do records management. Other items that are city daily business are not on this list. And for example, all the work that the planning staff does in terms of staffing commissions and writing staff reports and working on projects are not contemplated here, and I'm sure Bonnie can tell you, they're pretty full up. So when we talk about adding these things, even if there are consultants, it's a lot, because Bonnie has to review, consultants' work product. Other planners might have to be working in coordination. I don't know that we've distilled this down in a way to give you truly apples to apples, but we were trying to give you a flavor of that these things don't exist in a vacuum. We don't just add things. Something like when we add ordinances to ban a variety of things. So when we did the straws, I kind of polled staff how much time it took, and it's not just the city attorney drafting an ordinance and working with the environmental sustainability department to kind of put it out, but it also takes media staff time because they have to prepare educational materials and graphics for the website and various other postings and ads in the paper and flyers for businesses. And then we make videos to promulgate that information. And then after that, it continues to take code enforcement time because somebody has to follow up and make sure that people are complying. And clearly not all bans of materials are the same. The straws is probably the highest level of anything we've done. But again, it sort of takes staff time on all the things. And so I think what we're looking for is, we can't do it all. So which are those things that you find the highest priority?
So I would say, venture that the Woolsey fire was a good example of staff time being completely overwhelmed, projects that were on the list pre-Woolsey not moving forward because clearly Woolsey fire was the priority.
Yes, and that continues to be true, today, and we are anticipating that that will continue for the next several years. These are not only are we trying to, as we said, we've hired consultants to kind of help expedite things, but there's a lot of community outreach that we're doing in the form of workshops and messaging. We've added all these new web pages dedicated to that, and we're updating them as we get new information. And I see that happening for, it could be 5 years that we're still sort of dealing with those operational issues. Additionally, Public Works has been dealing with the aftermath in terms of storms. I mean, that we came back into this building after the fire and immediately were hit with a series of storms that we haven't seen in many years. And I don't think that they anticipate that there's going to be any winter, for the next few years again, where we're not dealing with mud and debris and the cleanup from that. So we see this happening for a long time, and again, pulling us away from other projects.
Mayor, can I just jump in for one moment?
Please.
I just was sitting here thinking that one of the things that the council might want to consider as you go through this is to give staff some general direction. So if the goal is to have a balanced budget, to find a way to dip into reserves while staying credit worthy, to direct staff to look at some potential temporary tax relief, so we could add potentially additional sales tax or short-term rental tax. Those might be some things just kind of keep in your mind that I don't have the answers of the dollar amounts today, but you could certainly provide us direction to come back in the next version of the budget to see how that might offset some other things that we're doing. So I'm just trying to give you some more things to think about.
Thank you.
I have a question, if I may.
Yes, Rick, you're up.
So if I'm looking at this, these unfunded things are, hey, with the budget as it stands, we can do everything except for these suggested unfunded things. And if we want to put one of these back on, we have to take something off. We're not even talking about the permits fee waiver. Like if we decide to waive all our permit fees, which is $2.5 million, we have to take $2.5 million off of something if we want to stay at our current credit rating.
Correct.
Correct? Okay, thank you.
Or find an additional revenue source.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Skylar?
All right, so I, just in looking at, for example, the first page here, what's in yellow,
The Environmental Commission, I think that we could just kind of shelve that for now on there. And what we'll do, at least Jefferson, if you're up for it, we could schedule some additional meetings on a little bit more regular basis so that people could bring any of those environmental concerns to that meeting. I think that would be a good way of not having to spend $150,000 on that, and we can go ahead and do that.
Certainly, that's one of the considerations the council would make, and I have no problem with that. We could schedule more of our ad hoc committee, meaning you and I should be there to listen to these things.
Yeah, exactly. And then
So-
the number 8 on there, the Civic Center specific plan, that's $500,000, and I don't see us getting to a place to do that at all in the next year, so I think that should be shelved and brought back in a year or 2 years from now.
Hey,
And-
before we get into specific items here, can we make a few general comments, if you don't mind?
Yes,
Because I'd like to talk about sort of where we want to go and make us some suggestions, and if I may, and then we'll go through.
Please do.
Okay, so in my view, I think, and I'm sorry the other Navy pilot guy is gone because, when you're. He's in the back. Oh, you in the back? Excellent. Okay, good. Well, I understand why you use blue because you're a Navy guy, but, when you're flying a plane, power available must exceed power required. And when it gets, your margin between power available and power required gives you maneuverability, flexibility, and a margin of safety. And when that gets really close, then you're on the edge. And when it gets into a deficit, then you have to jettison unnecessary cargo or fuel tanks. There you go. He's an F4 pilot, so I was a helicopter guy. But we have big auxiliary fuel tanks that we've jettisoned when needed, okay? And that's kind of where we are. We're on the edge here. Our margin of safety, which we're used to, which was quite robust, has, because of the fire, gotten down to the thin bit, I would say. So what are our priorities if we're going to do that? Are we going to go below the 65%? Are we going to go below 50% or all that? That's kind of the backdrop where I think we have to make these decisions. In my view, I think that maintaining a 65% credit rating is a safety factor. It is something to have in your quiver that you can draw upon should you need to borrow money for something like that. So I would caution us to do anything to go below that 65% sterling credit rating that our city professionals have done a good job of maintaining. We're in extremis. This is an extremis situation, and I think this is where we break out the red pen and look at all these things. And on the front page here, we should say, are there items that we must have? And if so, what else are we going to get rid of? But probably before that, we need to talk conceptually about the whole fee thing. Do we want to accommodate, and that's a pretty in-depth discussion. Do we want to just all the fees and just accept the fact of $2.5 million, or do we want to have a discussion about that? I mean, are fees covered by insurance companies? Is it an emotional issue? Should it be needs-driven? Should it be a case-by-case basis? Are there some fees we should waive and some that we shouldn't? Before we start kind of going off the budget and picking out one by one, which I'm happy to, and I'm a red pen guy myself. Oh, that's not red, that's gray. I think we need to kind of settle what we want to do with the fee thing, which is what most of the speakers came here to address. So that's just my comment. Before we get into the specifics, I'm happy to talk specifics.
Thank you, Rick. And Karen? Yeah.
I have some, I'm not sure if this is the right time for this question, but I'd like to know what the financial implication is for downgrading our Standard & Poor rating.
I think that's a hard number to quantify for you. I can say that every year the Standard & Poor's does reassess the city's credit rating and reissue a rating. Where it would be critical would be as we move forward with the assessment district for the wastewater phase 2 or for the Rambla undergrounding project. though whatever bonds we issue won't be guaranteed by the city's general fund, the bond issuer will look at the city's credit rating as part of that issuance. And also, over time, the city does everything it can to try and consolidate debt, basically refinance our mortgage. And as opportunities come up when interest rates go down, we will look at where we can consolidate things to lower our overall debt service. And so if in the next few years, if that came available for us to lower our actual payments, that would be something we'd want to take advantage of. Again, we present to you what the City Council has as, in terms of established policies of the reserve of 50% with a goal of the 65%, which is what we've achieved here. If the council so desires to try and find a different way of having a lower reserve, we can certainly reach out to our professionals, our bond counsel and our bond underwriters and Standard & Poor and ask, given the situation that we've just come out of a major emergency, is there a way of having kind of a pass for a couple years? More than happy to do that, but I didn't feel comfortable doing that without council direction.
Okay, thank you. So the two projects you mentioned, Phase 2 of the Civic Center wastewater treatment facility and the Rambla undergrounding. I know that the wastewater treatment facility is mandated. Is the Rambla underground project also mandated?
It's not. It's also not funded by the general fund. Mr. Dietrich isn't here today. If he were here, I'm sure he would say it is certainly mandated. And I know that those residents have worked very, very hard to personally, each one of them, provide funding for the design and engineering. And I think it's very important for the city to keep that project on task as we have promised to those residents. But it is not mandated in the way that the water treatment facility is mandated by the state.
Okay, one thing I had some correspondence this week with Mr. O'Neill. I was curious about the criteria that the Malibu Foundation, which he's on the board of, used in need determination for the fire relief that they were able to offer people in the first couple of months after the fire. I'm not sure what that is yet. I'm hoping we can find out.
Are you meaning that they might be able to help them out with fees and stuff like that?
That's a separate question. That is a separate question. If any private foundation is out there listening, yeah, I'd love to see that happen. I don't have any idea of the possibility of that, but the thing I'm more interested in, I think right now, is the criteria that was used to determine need. And if we didn't get it from the Malibu Foundation, we could perhaps look for it from another source that's done something similar, maybe in a different disaster. But then there's another whole question of setting precedent. So I would love to waive all fees. I'd also love to have all the things on our budget. But if we were to waive fees, need-based or otherwise, we all need to think about the precedent we're setting, and we can all pretty much bet on this not being our last disaster. So in the event, or I will say when the next fire happens, or the earthquake, or some other disaster, who knows, a terrorist act, I mean, God knows everything is possible in this world, then what is the precedent we're setting and where's the money coming from? So those are the big questions in my mind. And I don't know if anybody wants to pick it up from there. That's what I have to say at the moment.
Thank you, Karen. Mikey, you had comments?
Yeah, thank you everyone for what you said already. So let me just be really honest with my goal is here. My goal here is to try and waive fees, and I'm going to tell you why. And it comes from all of you, but it really also is really encapsulated by Mr. O'Neill in his email, talking about community, human capital, and people who live here and people that need to remain here. And then people, you know, it led me on my own trail, the people we're going to lose, the people that won't come back, what that means to this community. I'm not worried about precedent because anything we do, we can establish very well that we are doing it one step at a time, and that's all we're doing. And every other step has to be taken on its own. I do budgets for a living with my clients. This is quite a budget. I am so impressed at the work you did in such a short amount of time. And I spent a lot of time going over this. I'm going to give you my take. We're talking about $2.6 million in fees as a guess, as an educated guess. If I look at that and I change that a little bit to, it does not include people who sold their lot. So it doesn't include new owners after the fire. It does not include, hang on, just let me speak. I don't need the lawyer stuff yet. Thank you though, Trevor, didn't mean to be rude. Doesn't include CDPs, includes rebuilds, 10% rebuilds, primary home only. I don't know how we include insurance policies that specifically just cover that and have their own funding for that. I don't know enough about insurance. I'll come Sunday. Find out from the insurance commissioner. But in my mind, that lowers the need to about $2 million to get through this first wave. So I'm just laying out numbers, not laying out the law. That's your job. Figure it out. Just kidding. Yeah, there's a lot of other things that need to cut. But when I look at our general fund, the thing that we can push is your beloved project, the solar one. I think it's love it. I think we need it, but I think we have a community in huge amount of trauma that's gotten really, really hurt. I
agree with you.
Oh, you do? Okay, well, didn't expect that. But, so that's really all told $1.86 million right there if we push that. I want to add something else that I'm looking for support on that won't happen right away. This is a little bit further down the line, but this involves all of you. I want to bring forward to vote, because it has to go to vote of the citizens, that we increase our TOT tax, our hotel and short-term rentals, in other words, tax, from 12% to 15%. That's a 25% increase, which will generate, according to projections, $925,000 extra dollars a year. Santa Monica's TOT is 14%, plus they do something called a TMD, which is a marketing fund that's, I don't know if it's quite another percent, but it's close to 15%. Houston, where I'm going to a conference next week, is 18%, which I think is extremely high. I think we can go to 15%, and we will have no resistance on the voters or the people visiting Malibu that'll pay for that. So that won't cover maybe this year, but I am looking for additional revenue sources anywhere I can find them. Plus, we're going to have to definitely push a lot of other stuff. The other thing I'd like to do, and this is kind of feeds back into what my primary campaign promise had to do with PCH. I talked about this with Riva today. I would like to push forward spending money on one more VOP car. And I'd like that program to support it, and so that is out there generating revenue with tickets. I know we need a little look at that, but we have raised a lot of money with our VOPs, and we need to free up the sheriff. So we have a lot of competing things to do there. So that, I believe, in my estimates, could bring in another $150,000 a year. We'd have to pay $50,000 for the car, so maybe $100,000 a year. So I'm looking anywhere I can for things that are revenue positive. As far as fee waiver, I don't know about next year. I really don't. And I don't know how it works out down the line. I too, along with staff, think without this FEMA reimbursement, which I know we can't count on, and I don't think we should, we are a major disaster away from depleting our reserve fund. One disaster. And then what's our fallback then? We're selling all the land because that's our only asset left that we could really recoup cash. So I just want to be really blunt about that too. If somehow we just go into disaster mode, all that land we fought for, I don't know where else we would, recover that kind of money. I think too, with the open land and with a few other things going on in Malibu, there may be a chance for some things, for funds to come in from other sources. Not just grants, but private individuals that want to do things in Malibu to help Malibu. Or they want to bring their own project forward, and it might make financial sense for Malibu. Those are things we have to look at too, whether we like them or not. Some of them we may, some of them we may not. So my goal today, among a lot of other goals we got to accomplish here with a work plan that's mind-blowingly long, is to cover those fees with the caveat of what I said to sort of bring those fees down. I don't know what it exactly is. I can only estimate, and doing the math as best as I can in my head, and I'm a like Reva and Lisa, long practiced budget guesser, which is really what budgets are, educated guessing. I'm thinking it's going to be around $2 million, and that's enough for me now.
Thank you, Mikey. I know Trevor wanted to chime in. I know it's going to probably be something on the gifting of public funds and how we delineate between people who have not been burned out, how they have expectancy of fairness in plan fees. Is that where you're headed, sir?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think it's important to get direction from the council on their appetite for reducing fees and the priorities for that. We do have to be careful that we of our requirements, that we can't make a gift of public funds, and you run into an issue if you don't have a public purpose for that. Now, we would have a public purpose in terms of helping rebuild this area of town. I think there's a need to encourage that redevelopment for people that have lost their home there. When you try to start parsing it between people that have insurance or people that have that haven't sold their property, I think you're going to start to run into a problematic area.
Let me go a little further than that. So one reason this is not exactly a gift of public funds is by helping these people rebuild, we are going to reestablish our tax base. So there is actually a financial incentive to do that. The one reason our tax base is not falling as much as we expected is because some homes sold for unbelievable amounts of money in Malibu in the last year, which has kind of come to our rescue in a kind of a way. Everyone who burned down gets to readjust their tax base, but when they rebuild, their tax base is going to adjust back up. So that's going to have an impact right there. I hear what you say about favoring one over another, so how that's worded is valid. People that have sold their property are no longer primary residents that burned down. They're new owners. They are not in the same class, as far as I can tell. And there's no way, I guess they could prove, I don't know if we could even make an ordinance, if they build it and live there for 2 years or whatever it is, they prove their primary residency, then I'm wrong. But I think we know a lot of the people that sold have sold to developers that are going to sell them again. So I don't know if it's the same class. That's why I think primary home only. Something to think about. I'm not dictating law, and maybe I don't have my wording right. I'm trying to find a mechanism to achieve something that we've never gone through in our life. We've gone through our biggest disaster ever, and I've been through plenty. I've had my home burned down in the past too. I know it's terrible. But we are really, this disaster goes to another level where we're risking a real core of our community. And part of me feels like, why didn't everyone check on their insurance? Well, I know that it was not until the next day that I looked at my insurance and I looked at it and went, oh, wow, what did I not know? What do I know? I would very much promote, once again, that the city really, really reaches out to people and has them look at their insurance so that we don't have this surprise again. I think we're all pretty much guilty of not really having a clue what our insurance policy said. I look forward to talking Sunday to the insurance commissioner. So anyhow.
I don't think that anybody that's sitting up here disagrees that we don't feel that about everyone that's sitting here and every bit of loss that the city has encountered. I think it's our job to figure out how we're going to get there. So, Trevor, if we waive permit fees, where are the areas where we can make a distinction? If the property changes hands, can we say, no, we're not going to waive the permit fees for that property, even though it's a burn down?
I think that there's a number of different issues you're going to have to look at in terms of when you implement criteria beyond the property was burned down. You have an objective criteria that you're dealing with there, and as Councilman Pearson points out, you also have a motivation in terms of reacquiring that tax base. If you have somebody who sold that property to somebody else, I mean, they now own a property in the city, they are a resident of the city, the same as others. Determining someone's primary residence, I mean, everyone that's lost their home no longer is a primary resident. So I think we'd have to be really careful in terms of what terms we would use if you're trying to do something besides just saying if the house burned down in the Woolsey fire, we would waive XYZ fees.
Could you put like a time limit on it and say if the permits are applied for by X date, we'll be waiving fees by X date?
I mean, you can have it's a one-time waiver. That would be allowed. It's something that you'd be allowed to you need to apply. As anybody else would by a certain period of time. That would be something that you would be allowed. Again, the things you're looking at sort of are what the public purpose is. That you're not running afoul of equal protection, due process, or Commerce Clause issues.
I mean, I just said to Mikey, I said, what if we did like an allowance per property? If we said, hey, there's the estimated cost per property are, maybe Lisa or Bonnie, you could say, are X. We have this many properties. Could we go forth and do a 50% allowance or a 75% allowance to each property? And then I come back to, yes, I do support. I mean, from what I hear, I think it's important for us to look at increasing the temporary occupancy tax base. That's going to have to go to the voters. It would have to go out for a vote. I do believe it's a 2/3 vote. That may be a hard thing to get. It's not as easy as you think it is, or as I think it is. The second thing I would ask to Riva would be, is there a way to bond against temporary occupancy tax so that we could cover those costs now to deliver a balanced budget?
Just to point out also, the voter requirement would depend on how the transient occupancy tax is structured. So it could be a 50% vote or a 2/3 vote, depending on how we want to structure it.
What would the criteria for that be? If we said, I mean, just in terms of a timeline and whatnot, how soon could we get that to the voters? We probably couldn't make it for June. Would we have to go? I have no idea.
You could set a special election
for that. Mm-hmm. So we could set a special election. Okay. Well, these are all options. On the solar thing, it totally bums me out, but we had a big fire, so I get it. On the electrical vehicle thing, totally bums me out. I think we're behind the 8 ball on some of this stuff. We should have done the solar project a while ago. We're lagging. But I'm just being real. I understand it's not going to happen this year. I do think we should stick to the CPA thing, though, of going 100%. I do think the city should make it a priority to do that. Can we, Jefferson, maybe you want to do this, but how do you want to structure going through all these items, and let's go forward?
Well, it's up to other members of the council. However, you've graciously opted to take a big project and put that to planning department and to fees. I think that's very generous of you to offer that, because that was one of your pet projects. I think the public will recognize that. I know the council will recognize that, and I certainly do. And I think Trevor gets the idea here. We're trying to accommodate the needs of our homeowners here, and I think that's one way to get started.
Could we? I know that this is a budget meeting, but I would like to bring an item forward like in the future that deals with us discussing temporary occupancy tax and increasing that and going to a vote, and putting that on a ballot. And also, in terms of the budget, we're probably pretty well foolish to not think we're not paying 100% of the permit fees related to this. I just don't know how to get there. And that's what, I want everyone to know that. Like, I think that the city has been very fiscally conservative with things, and we'll remain that way. You have to give us a little bit of time to figure out how we're gonna do this, because I don't know if we're gonna do it right now.
One option might be a flat rate for rebuilds and plus 10%. So if it's $13,000 to $14,000 to accommodate the necessary fees per house, I'm just ballparking it. If you had a flat rate, that would simplify staff time rather than having to break down which permit, which where.
But I think I don't think that the flat rate would work, because I think that every project's different. I think that some houses may just be an out structure versus the whole structure versus a part of the house. And there's a lot of different permit fees that are on. Look, if they were gonna say, hey, there's one permit fee to come in and get a house, that'd be awesome. I just think that that's unrealistic, because I believe some of those fees are also based on the size of the house, correct? Yes. Maybe it's 75%, I don't know. Maybe we can come up with a percentage, and that's something that the council can work with. I mean, I would like to get as close to 100% as we can of those fees. I just don't know that fiscally we can present that without dipping into our reserve fund and jeopardizing any bonding opportunities and our credit rating. And I think that would be unwise to do that.
I'd like to hear from other council members. However, if you had a flat rate per property street address, you could go up to that rate, and then after that, you're gonna be into it for $3,000 to $4,000. It's simple.
So you're saying you would give I'm in favor of giving a flat rate allowance per each property, and saying if we have like 500 structures damaged, right? We could give each property a certain allowance, and if their permits cost beyond that, then they're responsible for that. But we would have to discuss that, and I don't know if that's how you would do it, Trevor. I don't know if that's a proper way or whatnot, and I don't know what that number would be.
That way, if you kept it at a flat rate, you could give staff and the people that are planning this budget a definite, there's 455 homes to be replaced, ballpark. And then you have the flat rate against what you have graciously allowed us to, item 28, 1.8 million, you could come to parity there. And that way, the homeowner is getting 4/5 of their cost of an allowance toward their rebuild and fee structures. 4/5 is pretty good.
Bonnie, or would you come up to the mic and maybe Lisa can answer this, I don't know, but what would be the approximate cost that your budget allocation would be for permits for each property?
If you can look at page 2 on item 1B.
So 13,000, so.
That's for build, so it depends, and so, again, this is a difficult number to estimate because we're using assumptions. So we're assuming that someone is coming in on a like-for-like plus 10% on a 2,500 square foot house. For planning, if they just need a verification of what they're bringing in, it's $165. If there's a minor site plan review, there's an increased charge, and if there's a major site plan review, not all properties are going to require that. And then we tried to give a general idea of what the building safety permit cost would be, again, using those 2,500 square foot like-for-like plus 10%. So the building safety cost would be approximately $13,000. There could be additional costs, and I think this is very important for the council and for the community to understand that each property is going to have specific issues. If there's geology problems, if there's drainage issues, I mean, there are additional costs. This is the basic get a building with no problem.
And Craig, we're requiring drainage on any new builds, correct?
That's been an item of discussion of what people are going to do. So if people aren't going to alter the grading or alter the drainage, then there's no requirement to do that. They could just build the house back what was there and not have to address that or the cost associated with that.
Okay.
I think you should try and go for something simple in terms of if you're gonna do a reduction as opposed to a total elimination, then it should be just a percentage of the total. Like, hey, 50% reduction in the total fees, whatever the heck they are, paid for the property, or 75% or 25%. And, you know, to keep it simple, rather than using one number that applies to all the different properties. I think that's probably a better idea.
So
That's similar to a flat rate, but a percentage, I get it. And that way we avoid some of the complications of a giving. Because
That's
then
like,
we're-
hey, you got a better deal than I did, you know?
Okay, so
Thank-
if we were to do that, my next question would be, I think that we should very much instruct Riva to look to the federal government to see if there's any funding options available within the federal structure that can help with these costs is coming back and reimbursing the city.
So just to help you out with that, Skylar, earlier this morning, I spoke with Lisa and Riva about the e-funding project, and it was handed off to some very big investors. And for the federal government to explore that kind of obligation or allowance to be, whether it's a mechanic's lien or whatever instrument that they choose to use to help you with the funding, it's going to be very difficult and will be very complicated. My suggestion is, and it sounds like Rick is on the same program, it's a simple, either a flat fee or a percentage, and that way we avoid Trevor and Christie with their issues that may come up. And I think a simple or flat fee or a percentage is something that we could consider.
So if we did a percentage, I would say 75% of the fee cost. And would you or would you not include a project that goes for an APR?
Is that waiving 75% of the fees or reducing the cost to 75% of the fees?
I mean, that would be the same thing, wouldn't
What are
it?
the legal implications?
No, I mean, would people be paying 25% of the current fee, or are they paying 75% of the current fee?
They would be paying 25%.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
So maybe like if the cost was regularly $100, they'd be responsible for $25.
Whatever one solar system works out to be.
That's where I was headed. Thank you for recognizing that. That's where I was headed. Additionally, he's offered the recharging stations as well, putting us at 19.2.
Can I jump in for a minute and see if I can help along with this? Perhaps there could be direction given to staff that the goal, if possible, would be to completely eliminate the fees for homes that are doing a like-for-like rebuild. If that's not financially possible after we remove, and I'm just making this up as I go, the solar project and anything else that the council decides tonight, then to find a way to make it work at a 75% reduction of fees. Is that?
I support that.
Sort of where you're headed, Mayor? Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, I was trying to get a consensus at council of where the council wanted to head. I'm certainly headed that way, but we have 4 other members.
I support that.
I just wanted to clarify, Councilmember Peak, when you were asking about looking at federal funding, you're asking me to research federal grants that could supplement some of the things that we don't have the funds for. Okay.
Could I just point out that I want to make sure that we're not just looking at this fiscal year, because I think we can all expect that these applications are going to go beyond this year. So in the interest of fairness, we have to be prepared to do that.
I mean,
A year, 2
yeah,
more
I think
years?
that when we were talking about the building process and that stuff, and let's say like when we were dealing with the temporary structures, that we were looking, I think it was a 4 or 5 year timeline, Craig? Was that what?
Yeah, that's really Bonnie's issue, but it is
Or
4 years for the
sorry, Bonnie.
temporary with a 2-year extension.
If we also, to address what Karen just mentioned, is not all 450 homes will be coming through in the first year. So if we take the 1.92 and put that over the amount of 450 homes, you come up with something in the 75% range, is what seems to have some kind of consensus here. It wouldn't matter as much because we'd already budgeted that 1.8 plus a recharging station, so there would be parity even if it was a 3 or 4 year project. Is that a correct and fair assessment?
It is, but now I'm going to put my finance hat on and say that I would just counsel the council to look at this year and give us direction on this year, because I certainly don't know what situation we'll be in a year from now, and I don't think we want to tie ourselves up. If we can make it again and make it work the following year or the year after that, absolutely. But I think it might be wise, and I'm like, Trevor's jumping in. Maybe I'm wrong.
We wouldn't be able to bind the future council anyway. The budget would be set next year. You could set it for this year, and then you could recommend, you know, that it's budgeted for in the future, but the council next year will make the decision about.
Right, I realize that, and I appreciate it, but I just want to make sure that we have a spirit of fairness going forward, and that consideration goes ahead.
To be clear on this, what we're doing is a 75% reduction of all of permit fee costs for like rebuilds during the Woolsey fire over the course of this budget cycle. And
I know I'm not going to complicate it, but it should include the 10%, as well as if somebody's going for a CDP, they should also get an allowance, because in essence, they're just taking a longer route to get a larger home. The fee structure would vacillate between a 5,000 square foot home and a CDP process through coastal. So we would have to ameliorate that as well. Is that correct, Trevor?
Well, I mean, that'd be a different proposal, I think.
But you can't exclude people that have a burnout and want to build like plus 10% is one group, like plus CDP through coastal is another group, but it's still a home loss.
I mean, I think the city could look at the options for doing that, but I think you could have a public purpose in encouraging, you know, that you want people to rebuild fast, that would rebuild, you know, like for like plus 10%, which would justify a reduction in that fee versus, you know, a longer term project maybe as a different purpose that wouldn't fit there.
Right. Yeah, I think the spirit of this is, you know, hey, we're trying to make people whole, and that's the deal. It's not, hey, I want to make my house twice as big. Okay, it's a different ballgame.
I'll just offer one clarification. The like-for-like, one way to think about it is that like-for-like replacement is the most expeditious. It's you know, basically putting back what you had, and the 10% is pretty nominal in terms of an increase. If somebody is pursuing a project that requires a CDP, it will almost always be an elective decision to make a house bigger, to completely change the project. So that's really the difference between someone who's just trying to do it as quick and get what they had before versus somebody that's trying to do a completely new, larger project.
You wouldn't be excluding anyone from getting that potential benefit, but if someone chose not to take that benefit and instead wants a larger house.
It's an elective, it's a choice.
I understand, and thank you. And you led me down the path of de-incentivizing some of the what we're seeing in the public opinion polls is some of these lots are selling, and there's a developer behind it. So by doing this, you've led us down that path. Bonnie, thank you for seeing that. And now I feel better.
So I want to get back to what Riva said. What I loved about what you said, Riva, look at trying to do 100%, fallback is 75. Because you know what's good about that? It puts the pressure on us up here to figure it out. So, and of course there'll be an impact if we cut to make 100%, and it might be too severe for many people, or maybe it makes sense. I don't know. This is a big, big budget. There's 5 of us. I have no idea what we all agree on. I mean, there's easy ways to do it. There's a $3 million recreational budget, but you know, which kids do we want to make unhappy? You know, there's choices like that really, you know, exactly. I don't think anyone wants to make the kids unhappy, but there's all sorts of tough calls that can be made. What's the line that makes sense?
Can I just ask for one clarification as well? I know we're talking about limiting this to the proposed budget, which is for next fiscal year. We do have a lot of people that have already come in and gotten the permits rolling in the current fiscal year. So are you including those?
Yes, refund
and
them.
Refunding those. So
Yes.
we will need to do a calculation on what that is.
Send them a check.
Or if they haven't gone all the way through the process, what they spent may cover the difference between the 75% and becoming whole at 100. So if you say that we've had 70 or 80 applications turned in, I'm ballparking it, they're not all the way through the process. So that would educate itself.
Correct.
Is that fair?
I think we just need to do some calculations because we hadn't looked at this year in terms of figuring out what those what monies have already come in, and that's something we'll
Yeah,
have
there
to
may
move
be
forward.
issues also in terms of refunding people that have already paid that. You may be able to give them a credit for future fees that are coming through. But
That's what
at
I
that
just
point,
said.
you're not,
That's what I
at that
just
point, you're
said.
not incentivizing them, you're just giving them money back.
So just to point out, we will look at that. I
We
think
can
it's
take a closer look
Yeah, I think
at
it's in the
options for-
neighborhood of several $100,000 that we've collected this year. So that will throw our starting fund balance off a bit. But again, you know, we will do everything we can to try and figure out how to make this work.
All right.
And one last comment. I think I agree with Skylar that we need to maintain our Sterling credit rating and 65% balance reserve.
It's going to be challenging, but I agree.
Do we need to go through more of this now?
I have a couple of questions about specifics now that we've talked about the spirit and the general trajectory on which we can talk about things. If we want to get into specific issues, can we do that now?
I would agree. Some of us have to take a utility break.
Okay, I'm up for that.
And can we make it brief, because we have a number of people that wanted to hear our decision-making. It's 8:15, make it 8:25 back at the dais here. Thank you. That's 10 minutes on the nose. Mike's headed back. And we're back, 8:25, and I believe Rick was on talk.
You know, I'm happy. I've just got the answer I needed. It was on one of these items, so I'm good.
Okay, Skylar's up.
All right, so I just wanted to kind of go through this with some quick thoughts, but trying to be rational and reasonable. We'll start with the yellow sheet. There's a couple things on here that I think that we can postpone. The electric feet can be postponed. The mobile command post can be postponed.
Skylar, can I just jump in about the yellow sheet? None of the items on the yellow sheet are funded in this year's budget.
I'm aware of that.
Okay.
So, but I am going to say, the coastal vulnerability assessment is something that's very important. Sea level rise is a real thing, and that is a real issue that we need to pay attention to. If we're not able to fund it right now, I would ask that it comes back at mid-year.
I would be alarmed, Skylar. That is so important. It deals with our FEMA issue as well, and Moffett and Nichols can use some of that evaluations in our position with FEMA on wave uprush and things like that. So I hate to get into the meat and potatoes right here tonight, but that's one I don't, we've got to do that eventually.
Okay.
So then we're looking for 200 grand to cut somewhere else.
Or Mayor, would you be amenable to what Councilmember Peak suggested is included at the mid-year if there's funding, or you want to find funding at this point in time?
Well, I think the rest of the council should be able to elaborate, but I've been following this. I've kind of been the one that's been tasked with it by the general public. I just would hate to see that go away because of what we're faced with. It's a very valuable program, and we need to perform on it anyway.
I'm willing to entertain keeping it if you want to identify something to remove. So
I'm happy with that. We'll find one.
Okay, so
Can I just ask Craig to clarify what it is? Because I don't think it has to do with the Moffett and Nichols reports.
What they end up using as part of this evaluation in their reports.
Yeah, the coastal vulnerability report is just an assessment tool. We are a little behind a lot of the other cities around, and the beaches and harbor have done the assessment already. It will lead to the LCP amendments eventually, so it is something sooner or later we're going to have to address. There's not a deadline currently, but I agree it's an important issue. It's up to you to decide how important and how soon we should move forward with it.
Thank you, Craig.
all right, may I keep going? Okay, so I would like to see businesses licenses come back. I think that's an important thing. I think it's important, especially with the amount of work that's going to be going on in the city, construction-wise. And I know that we can't fund it right now, but I'd like to see that come back. The utilities underground assessment formation outreach program, that can wait. I would love to see Metro Freeway Service Program happening, but I realize that we can't fund it right now. And the ESHA map is gonna have to get postponed, and that should probably wait till after the coastal assessment and all that stuff is done anyways. There's, on the green page, there are 32, 33, 34, 35, and 36. They're all sort of environmental items that are not funded in terms of their outreach and whatnot, and I would like to see those things come back all together, not in next year, the year after. And the reason for that is really to free up staff time. I think that the one thing that I take away from any and all of this right now is that we need to make it a priority for the staff to complete all the fire-related tasks, and that needs to be at the priority of what they're doing. I know that there's regular business that we have to handle, but these other items, I think that, do we have consensus on that as a council, that needs to be our priority?
Well, I think.
Which items are you specifying in particular?
I'm just talking about in general. I'm talking about in general in terms of staff allocation of time, and specifically in regards to planning and others, that their primary focus should be in getting people back in their homes as soon as possible.
So number one in the work plan, you're saying, in buckets would be Woolsey Fire recovery.
Yes.
Can we get a consensus on that so that we can at least move forward on?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely.
All in favor, aye.
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 And then the last thing, which I believe is funded, but would be the number 55, on the last page, the Legacy Park Enhancement Plan. I would ask that that get postponed because that will free up a little bit of money to move around.
This is the re-landscaping.
This is the art enhancement plan at Legacy Park. So there's two different projects going on. One is a landscaping project that will address some of the plant and soil issues that we've had. And then there's also an art enhancement plan. Legacy Park funds can be used for a variety of purposes. And so if we remove something that's funded with Legacy Park, I can actually supplement general fund. So it actually ends up freeing up general fund dollars elsewhere.
So we're talking about number 55, not number 30?
That one's already unfunded, it looks like.
We're talking about 55, not 30.
Okay, thank you.
Can we get a consensus on that, please?
What are we saying? Because it's,
I
it
missed
looks on
that
this
too.
thing
What are we
like
saying
it's
exactly?
So
unfunded already.
55 is replenishment on landscaping in Legacy Park. It's something that is already funded, so we can take that out and put it towards something else.
Let me just make sure I'm explaining
Yeah.
this correctly. Both the Legacy Park landscape project and the art enhancement project are funded with Legacy Park funds. What I believe Councilmember Peak was asking was if we could delay the Legacy Park art enhancement plan for a year, and that would free up $150,000 of Legacy Park funds, and that could be used elsewhere, which would thereby free up general fund dollars.
Perfect, excellent,
That's exactly what I was saying.
well done.
Yeah,
Do we
let's-
have consensus on that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we have consensus, but it looks like it's already unfunded on the right column, isn't it?
Correct.
Correct.
It is not funded.
Okay.
So if we
So
hold
that
it,
doesn't do anything for us.
It doesn't do anything for us, but it takes it off the work plan for this year. So
Okay.
I was
Correct.
wrong. That's why I have Lisa here.
And me, I pointed that out, okay?
Correct.
Is there anything else on the work plan that council would want to rejigger or remove?
Well, that's why we'll go down the list and see what council member wishes an additional.
Is there anything different than what I just said?
All right, let me ask you a question about the skate park facility. Okay, now there's supposedly some private donation. Is that still available there? So does that mean that doesn't include that at all? Like at that skate park issue, which I think is gaining momentum.
I think the skate park, Brian Strange was the main contributor, and he's made that and elaborated on it, how he wanted it, and as far as I know, as of 2 months ago, he was still up for that.
All right.
But he needs a piece of property to put it on.
and
Got
that's
it.
our job to figure that out.
So is there anything else on here?
I would like to see the parking meters implementation program come back at the mid-year review for consideration. If not in whole, then maybe, a part of it to get going on it, at least in some needed areas in the city. I'm not a big fan of parking meters all over, just in some places in the city.
Well, yeah, and I think we should, anyhow, let's not get into that now, but I have thoughts on it too, but,
How do we feel on that one for Reva to?
Bring it back mid-year, that's fine.
and,
Is that okay with everybody?
yes.
Yes.
Okay.
My
Yes.
thought on number 75, the emergency warning sirens, and talking to Reva, that she's out looking for grants to see what can happen there, at least to start, correct?
Correct. So we've included $100,000 for the design and research of that project, and that is funded. We're estimating the total construction project to be somewhere in the $1 million range, $900,000 to $1 million. That's not in the budget, and we are seeking grant funds for that.
So I see one problem one here that you described briefly earlier when we met, but that has to do with school district separation. And there's a number here. Can you describe again where we're at on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So right now we have a consultant working on the financial analysis, and we do have funds in the current budget and next year's proposed budget that will cover that consultant's costs. We also have one of the city attorneys working on that, and we have that funded as well. We're expecting, if the process moves forward, that there will be some costs coming up that would include the CEQA analysis, potentially an EIR document that has to be developed, and also a report that needs to be developed that would be presented to the State Board of Education. We put those in as an expected cost. They're not funded in the budget. I think it's very important to keep the school district separation as a high priority on the work plan, but we don't need to add any additional funding to it at this time. If by luck we get to those tasks this year, we will have to find a way to fund it. But right now, I think we're fine just keeping it as a high priority work plan item.
And I know I'm dragging on here, but the vacant parcels, there's a line item there that's unfunded, and is that just to explore what to do, which is clearly what the community needs to do, but we don't have the money? Is that how we're looking at it right now?
Correct. We had previously funded $250,000 that was then reallocated to public safety needs at the mid-year this year. That's the estimate to hire a consultant to do the public outreach to discuss all of the vacant properties, which would include Trancas Field, Heather Cliff, the Crummer Case property, La Paz, and the Ioki parcel. So at this time, it is not funded, and that could be a work plan item and a funding, potential funding for a future year.
And obviously that, to me, not obviously maybe only to me, that plays into trying to figure out where we're going on something that's now just sitting there. So does that preclude us from doing any sort of public meeting to start exploring the subject, or where do we end up there?
Well, we could get rid of something if you want to put it back on.
Yeah, there you go.
Red pen, baby. Let's do it.
Yeah.
We can certainly have a public meeting. Again, that takes staff time and staff resources, and one of the things the council should keep in mind when discussing what to do with the vacant properties is, hypothetically, if we had a meeting to discuss what we wanted to do with it, say next month we had a meeting, but we don't have the funds to do those things, and that may be 3 or 4 or 5 years out. By the time we get to that period of time, that information could be stale, and we'd have to do it again. So just something we want to, again, when we have very limited staff resources, they might be better spent doing something different at this time.
So in the meantime, we could hope members of the public have all this extra money that they just want to offer up for really cool amenities. Would that be possible?
Yes.
Okay, just thinking. I just thought I'd say it.
Yeah, we just need somebody to donate $50,000 for a VOP vehicle. That shouldn't be difficult, too.
Actually, that's a revenue producer, so we have free labor and the cost of a vehicle, and those tickets really add up. That would pay for itself in a year.
I agree, but, you know, just like the lifeguards get their vehicles
I'm saying.
donated, maybe we could explore that.
Tesla parking assault vehicles.
Karen, you had one you wanted to go through?
Yeah, I'd like to know how everybody feels about the sign ordinance.
I feel great about it.
Well,
Feel great about it in a couple of years.
right, that's my point.
I'd like to comment on that. I was part of the planning commission when we attempted to do the sign ordinance. It was such a disaster that I think Joyce Parker-Belinsky quit. I'd just say she took one look at our first attempt and abandoned ship entirely. I think it's a very complicated project, even though it doesn't sound like it, so I think we need to push it, unfortunately, but we do need to get it done at some point.
Okay, so defer, yes? Yeah,
That's
okay, thank you.
consensus on that?
Yes.
Yes.
Consensus.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the budget as we've referenced all these items.
I would like to second that, but I would like to make an amendment, because we said the priority should be the Woolsey fire rebuilds. I think the second priority should be school separation.
To be clear, we're not approving the budget here. We're providing guidance to staff.
I'm concluding our recommendations.
Okay, so that would be the,
And I would like to ask Lisa and Reva what we might be missing that they're sitting there thinking they really need to focus on this. It's a large budget with a lot of moving parts, and you guys have spent so much time on this, and you and your staff, that we're trying to digest what's literally really should take about a month for us to digest in a very short amount of time. And I know we're coming back, but you don't have to answer now, but really we need your guidance on what we can't see and quite grasp right now.
I guess one way would be for me to read off the things that have gotten left on the work plan, if that would be helpful. So at this time, what I have is the FAA airplane noise, which actually is being handled more by Councilmember Mullen and the City Attorney's Office, so that's good. FEMA floodplain maps. I'm leaving the skate park facility on, even though there's no funding associated with it. The design of emergency warning sirens. We are postponing Civic Center specific plan, was that correct? Yes. We're postponing the mobile command post.
Yes.
We're keeping school district separation.
Yes.
We're postponing discussion on the vacant properties.
Yes.
We're keeping coastal vulnerability assessment. Oh, that's mid-year, or we're keeping it as a task? We're keeping it and we need to find funding for
Yeah,
it.
the agreement was
Okay,
that we're
sorry.
leaving that in because of the complications.
I missed that.
Yeah, that's also going to vary too, because there's been a lot of erosion with all the rain and stuff that we had, so that's kind of important. A lot of the coastal bluffs
Okay.
have been sliding.
We are pushing parking meter implementation program to mid-year if there's funds available.
But I see there's 10,000 bucks, right? You got 210 and 200. Are you doing something with 10,000 bucks?
I'm sorry, I'm not following what
So
you're
you
looking
have
at. sir.
210 and then 200. So does that mean something's happening
a
with
clerical
that $10,000?
mistake.
That was a typo,
Oh, dang it.
but thank you for catching that.
Okay.
Those always make me happy.
So that's coming back for mid-year.
The parking meter implementation program, we will do what we can to bring it back at mid-year if we can find $200,000 to move it forward, or 210, whichever one is right.
Or grants.
The Environmental Commission, we're postponing, but in lieu of that, we're going to set up regular environmental sustainability meetings.
Yes, with Skylar and myself.
Business license, you asked for that to come back if possible at mid-year. Is that
Yep.
correct, or is that a future year?
Mid-year would be awesome.
Sign ordinance, we're postponing it for a year. I'd like to ask if the council would be willing to postpone the wireless communications facility ordinance for a year.
Yes.
Yes, our phones still will not work, everybody.
Yes.
Utilities undergrounding assessment district, we're postponing for a year.
Yeah,
Metro freeway service postponing.
postponing unless the county wants to be so generous and give it to us.
Is that even ever going to happen? Maybe we should just cancel that one.
No, they did. It can happen.
Okay.
It's ready to rock, dude. We'd be getting those cars off and the traffic flowing.
All right.
I'd like to ask if the council would be willing to postpone the LCP ESHA map task for a year.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm under the understanding that Councilmember Peak wanted to keep the Clean Power Alliance option at the 100% renewable.
Absolutely, especially considering we're postponing our solar.
Wait a minute. Don't we have to vote on that 50% or 100% thing?
No, I'm talking about 100% for the city, just for the
For
city's
city
buildings.
facilities, not for citizens.
Are we at 100?
It's a budgetary item.
The city opted for the entire city to opt to, the base tier is set at 50%. People have the option to go lower if they want, they can opt out, they can opt up to 100%. I think what Councilmember Peak is asking is that the city, for its own facilities, opt up to 100% renewable, which would be, we're estimating over all of our facilities a $30,000 cost for the year.
Thank you for clarifying that.
So we just have to find 30 grand somewhere else.
Correct.
Correct. So now we're on the green page for council, and it's my understanding that all of the items have been left on except for when you get to City Hall Solar Project in the middle of the page, and 28, 32, 33, 34, 35, and 36 have all been postponed to a future year.
And I wanted to say I
agree.
recognize probably the challenge here on these pages is time, staff time, correct?
Correct.
Well, maybe we can just sort of do updates as we go along occasionally and how difficult that really is, because I can see it's going to be, there's just so many.
We do, when we bring the quarterly budget reports, we do status updates on the items on the work plan. So now that we have this chart, we can begin to kind of look at where we are as again, as we're prioritizing Woolsey fire recovery, how many things we're really not getting to in terms of, you know, other planning items, other projects like that.
Right, thank you.
So then it was my understanding that everything else on the green page, most of which are just daily tasks that the staff continues to do, as well as special events and programming for community services, public safety, high priority items, and certain capital projects that are funded by the general fund will be continued on this year's work plan. And then on the blue page.
Wait, one quick question.
Sure.
Because you got down into some emergency preparedness and other items. Do we need to help prioritize that for you and the staff?
I don't think at this time we do. I think we're clear on what we need to do and move them all forward as quickly as possible.
We've already kind of started with Woolsey and we've moved to, we got schools, we've got
That's
two.
correct. That's correct.
Okay.
So public safety, then
Number
also
3,
high.
I'm going to say was, you want public safety to be number 2 and school district number 3. Would that work?
I'd go with that.
I'd go with that. He nodded yes while he yawned.
Yes.
I would go with public safety always as number 1, and then getting people in their houses, and then dealing with schools. Because public safety is a priority no matter what. That's our job.
Yeah, he's got a good point. I guess we don't have public safety.
I could
you're
support
not
that.
gonna get in your house.
Yeah, the public safety is number 1, always.
Build number 2, school number 3, mission statement 4. Wait a minute, mission statement's 1A for everything.
I didn't know we were picking a top 10 list here, but I certainly am happy with the first 3. And if we wanted to move on, we can establish the top 10 list later on, because otherwise.
I think those are the 3 biggies. We can just hang with those.
And then it's my understanding that everything on the page that's blue is remaining on the work plan. Again, many of these are capital projects and public works assignments.
Except for the art and Legacy Park, right?
That got moved off the work plan, correct.
And I'd just like to say publicly on the record, I do believe the Charmley land should remain closed right now to let it heal for a while, and should not be a top priority. I recognize people may trespass on it and there may be issues there, but in my reading of the science on it, we need to let that land breathe a little bit, then go in, and we do have a lot of decisions to make, obviously. But
I spoke with Riva about it, that FEMA application through Joe to replace what was lost was still on his plate because the swap happened after that event, so.
We are working with FEMA because it seems in the best interest if the city is going to take on the management, that we actually maybe control the rebuilding that needs to happen, so we can make the decision about the picnic tables and everything else. I'm in discussions with our FEMA project manager, who's talking to the MRCA Conservancy's project manager about whether that FEMA project could be transferred to the city.
Okay, because I sat next to Joe at the meeting today, and he just shrugged his shoulders when I mentioned it to him, so I guess he's on board.
He directed me to work with his staff, so I've been in touch with them in terms of trying to do an assessment, and we went out there last week with Jesse and Adam to look at the property and see the shape it's in, and I agree that there's not a quick path to opening it, and it probably is in the best interest because of not the buildings did not sustain a lot of damage. There's some, but the vegetation around the public areas, a lot of burned trees, that we really need to wait and see and kind of watch what they're doing. And at this point, none of us have looked at the trail network at all, and I don't know what damage happened in the storms, and so I think there's a long time before we actually would want to open that up.
Mayor, if I might ask, I know a lot of the tasks are headed for the planning department, and I just wanted to ask if it would be possible to kind of give them a little direction so that they know what to focus on. Obviously, the first and most important is focusing on the Woolsey Fire rebuild, but we also have a priority to ask for the mansionization ordinance. We have the beachfront or non-beachfront standards, the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, and short-term rentals are all pretty important things that are on their to-do list, and if you could give us some direction on what you would like them to start with, that would be very helpful.
Sure, we'll entertain that, I guess, right now. We're here at the dais. Let's go through it. We want to start at one end or the other?
I'm happy to start, as always. Of the ones you mentioned, I think two biggies that are of importance to a lot of people is the mansionization one and short-term rentals.
I would concur. I don't know how everybody else feels, but mansionization and short-term was one of the top ones.
And then where would you place the accessory dwelling units and beachfront and parking as a standalone use as well?
Way below those two.
Aren't ADUs, aren't they mandated? So do we have some compliance we need to take care of there, Trevor, Reva, Bonnie, somebody?
Yeah, it is state law that's now in effect, so certain things are automatically in effect in the city, but finishing the ordinance, which we've already presented to the Planning Commission, they asked for some additional information, so we're sort of halfway there. I think that's something we could get over the hill with pretty quickly.
I was gonna ask you, Bonnie, like, of the things that were just discussed, it sounds like that's something that we could wrap up in the next few months.
I believe that we
So
could.
let's do that. Let's get it done and off the plate.
Yeah.
What do you see that you would put on this list as a priority, Bonnie, out of curiosity?
The beachfront, non-beachfront issue is one that would serve to clarify the code greatly. It's
That's an
something
important issue.
Yeah, it flies under the radar, but it's a cleanup issue that I think is very important, and I don't think that will take a long time either. We're
Let's
a ways
clean it
down
up
the
then.
path.
After you're done, I'll chime in after Bonnie's done.
Okay. Let's see. I think those are the main, well, parking is a standalone use. The urgency behind that one kind of depends on how quickly we'd be moving forward with work on the triangle property or anything like that. So if that's in the queue, then we should prioritize that one as well.
So the parking is a standalone use. The way it would affect the triangle property is that we purchase that with funds. That it can only be used for parking, so if by some miracle we ended up with grant funds that could build a parking lot, then we would want that to move forward. And I believe there was another privately owned property in the city, in the Civic Center, that was interested.
Right.
We can wait and deal with that at the time when that comes forward. That's not, I mean, I understand that it's important, but we don't need to do it right now. Other things seem a little bit more pressing, would have far greater effect.
One long-term issue that's been up before us many times, and we haven't really pushed it lately, but we should, is the poison-free issue, because Keon has been on that for so many years, and I think we deserve to give an opinion on that, and I think it should be on the list. Just my feelings. I wonder if we could get consensus on that.
It is currently on the list, and we didn't discuss it tonight. The staff is actually ready to move forward with an item to the Environmental Sustainability Committee. So as soon as Skylar and you give us a date, we're ready to move forward with that.
Nice. So that's just on you guys, and we all
All
get
right,
to sit
that's
back
gonna be-
and wonder why you don't get it done.
We're going to get to that right away.
Okay, did you get the clarity you were looking for?
I have one question actually for Trevor on the overnight parking ordinance. Is there any concern on your part, given the recent court case about sleeping in your vehicle and that we might be concerned about and might want to push that off? Or is that something you think we should move forward with?
Sorry, which ordinance are we talking about?
This is the proposed overnight parking ordinance that's been on our list for a while. It's morphed from limited parking to RV parking to just overnight parking for oversized vehicles.
Well, there will be issues with that, since there's a number of court cases that if there isn't available sleeping quarters for everybody to enforce that, we could run into issues. So it's a complicated one.
It's a very complicated one, actually. And it definitely, if we don't deal with that right, we will get sued.
Honestly, with that issue, that's an issue that we should be pressing the state on to get us a law that will deal with this.
The
I'll add
problem
that
is,
to my list.
where are they gonna, who are we gonna NIMBYism on, you know? That's the big problem. There's just, it's everywhere. It's not just here.
The state could get a law in effect that says that they are not gonna allow overnight parking on state highways.
And you can always escort them down to Topanga.
We
Well, if
could
they're not
always
on
get the
state
state to
highways,
open up the motel that's there.
I'll counter, if they're not on state highways, then they're in your neighborhood. So that's, you know.
The beauty of a
there's-
double-edged sword, Mikey. There's no winning.
Agreed. It's a very difficult one, and we got to move carefully on that because it's a societal nightmare disaster, and it's really difficult in my opinion.
So it sounds like we're postponing that one.
Could that be a mid-year? Because we're gonna have to go through one summer and we're gonna hear from our elected people that elect us over this summer when it becomes more paramount in their minds as they see traffic congestion and all kinds of behaviors. Yeah.
Why don't we leave it on the work plan, and it will be a lower priority for right now, and if we can find resources, we'll certainly address it. I understand the concern.
That sounds okay to me. Is that for the rest of the council?
Thank you.
Good.
Okay, you got it.
This has been incredibly helpful for us.
Awesome.
How else can we help you?
So I just want to be clear about the consensus for coming back with the reduction of fees would be, the goal is 100%, but no less than 75%, and that's like for like and like for like plus 10?
Correct.
Okay.
And then I also just want to point out that we will be bringing the fee schedule forward to the council for adoption on May 13th, and that will continue to have the full fees on there, but we will separately have a resolution that provides for the reduction pursuant to council direction. So I say that partly for the council and also for the audience and whomever is watching at home, that there will be an item coming forward because we do have to have those fees on the schedule adopted by council, but that doesn't mean that the council hasn't taken further action to reduce them. So if that is helpful.
Can I want to bring up a minor issue which I gather has some legal thing attached, according to what I understand. I've been pretty passionate about trying to get my commissioners' business cards because they're very busy out in the community, and I push them and I want them to be. I know Planning Commission gets cards, but none of the other commissioners do. Is there any issue there legally on doing that? I've offered to pay for my own commissioners' cards or whatever it takes. I expect a lot out of them, so I'd like to help them do their jobs. So that's my goal.
Well, as it was discussed, there was also the needs that some of them had mentioned for their own web address and everything too. If you could clarify on that, Reva, the other complications with that one?
Email address, is that?
Oh, yeah.
Like an email account, is that what you meant?
Yes.
Mayor, Mr. Mayor?
So as the council knows, we've had a lot of issues with records requests that pertain to emails, particularly city-based emails on personal devices. The city council adopted a policy as it relates to the council where we issue city-owned devices where you access your city email, which makes the process of looking for records when the records requests come in much simpler. During the Malibu Township Council case, there was extensive subpoenas issued for those devices. So I guess I would look to the city attorney about his concern of issuing city emails that would then be accessed on personal devices by commissioners.
Sorry I didn't talk to you earlier about it, but it came up in conversations.
No worries. I mean, it's something that the city can look into. Other cities do provide city email addresses. It does add cost in terms of, you're going to have the storage, you're going to have issues with, the destruction of that, and then the use of those email addresses, as the city manager mentioned, on their personal devices. But it is a decision that you could make if you want to have an item come back to consider doing that. The other issues with the business cards would be, I think you want to be very careful with how those are used. Just because you have a business card, they don't speak for the city, they don't have any ability to represent the city council speaks for the city. And so you want to be very, we want to have some kind of guidance if you're going to go that way, to avoid any type of misuse.
Is there verbiage we could put on a card that would make you feel comfortable in that effect?
Potentially, yeah.
Would you like to think about it? I really would love to get them cards, so if there's something you recommend, I'd be very curious what it is.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
So, Mikey, let me ask you a question. You're
Of course.
planning commissioner for how long? 6 years?
Me, almost 7.
Okay. Did you need or find value in having a business card?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You almost tiled.
With Public Works, I think I'm past that.
But you just reduced the budget, so I can't get him a tile.
I said I'd pay for the card, so.
Any others on Blue Page? Seems like
It's my
we've-
understanding
yeah.
the rest of those items will remain on the
Okay.
work plan.
Copy that, then it sounds like.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Wait, just
Wait,
quickly.
we got one more comment from Mikey.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Too many. I just want to make sure we're agendizing, talking about TOT next meeting, so we can try and push that forward.
I don't know if I'll be able to do it on the May 13th agenda, but I will get
Fair
it
point.
to you as soon as possible, perhaps when the budget comes back at the second meeting in May.
Okay, thank you. That's fine. Thank you.
And can I just echo what Reva said? Thank you so much for this robust discussion. This is not typically as in-depth as we've had this first budget meeting, and it is immeasurably helpful. It's been a complicated budget this year, more than usual, and your direction tonight is really helpful and will help us give you something when we come back in May that hopefully accomplishes your goals.
And then we'll have more public outreach as well, now that we've given some definition, and thank you, Lisa, for prevailing.
Yeah, and I would
pointing it out.
return that you guys were so prepared and did so much work, and then even got more prepared after the first time I went through it with more data. So a lot of that's thanks to you. So thank you all for, really an amazing job on this.
Well, we have a motion and second, and I think we'll call it adjournment at 9:04 this evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.